Here.
Mrs. Sherman,
Here.
Mrs. Caden.
Here, please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, there was no executive session this evening. We've flipped things in order to be able to have, to ask questions, during the presentation. So first, can I get a motion to enter committee of the whole?
So moved.
And second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
So first things first, sadly, anyone that was coming specifically for the accordion club performance will need to make sure that they come back next month because that is when that performance will be taking place. We are looking forward to it. Ms. DeAngelis, who runs the club, is also getting lessons and I believe will be performing as well. Oh, not performing as well, but also taking lessons just to be in it with the kids. So we thank her for that. So we are going to move on to our only presentation of the night, which is the budget presentation, and Dr. McDowell and Ms. Coleman will present.
Okay, so good evening, everyone. We are going to stand off to the side. As a general habit, I don't like to stand with my back to the audience. And so welcome, thank you all for being here. And so the theme moving into 24-25 is shifting from recovery to rigor. And so for the last 3 years, we've been heavily focused on academic recovery, trying to come back from the pandemic better than we were moving into the pandemic. But it's now time for us to move and aggressively shift into a new direction based on what we've learned over the last 3 years. And so we do believe that this is appropriate. And so we all want to make sure that we're grounded in our mission and our vision as well as our values. And so we continue to use these as our guiding star and as our guiding principles in everything that we do. And so, what is the budget challenge? And so we want to move away from innuendo, and we want to move away from some of the information that has gone back and forth over the last several months. And so we've talked about, both publicly and in small groups, that the fiscal cliff was coming. So we've known for about 3 years that the fiscal cliff was coming, and I am not proud to say that we have reached a cliff. And so when we think about what is the budget challenge, Collingswood is not immune to the budget challenge that we're seeing across the country and specifically across many districts in New Jersey. And so we have what's called a structural budget deficit. What that means is that the cost to educate our students, the cost to provide services, significantly exceeds the amount of revenue, new dollars, that comes in year over year. And it becomes more and more difficult each and every year. Hence the reason why, since March, we've been asking for the community to partner with us to aggressively advocate for a fairer funding formula at the state level with the current funding formula expiring this year. And so while the state is contemplating a new funding formula that prioritizes the needs of students across every school community in New Jersey, we need your voice to help put the necessary pressure on the state legislators as well as the governor's office in order to put a better foot forward to fund education in our communities. And if they're not going to do that, provide each locality the flexibility to go to their community and ask for what they need. And so we looked at the last 2 years. And so if you look here on your far left-hand side, that accounts for millions of dollars. And then underneath are academic year 23-24 and then 24-25. And so the costs, the increase in cost last year was $3.4 million doing what we had done, nothing new. The actual revenues that were generated was $1.6 million, creating a deficit. And so we had a significant hurdle that we needed to overcome last year. Fortunately, we were able to significantly scale back in administrative costs. We were able to leverage grant dollars, and we were able to, simply through attrition and retirements, we were able to minimize the disruptive impact of a reduction in force without layoffs. Move us to 24-25. The increase in cost is $4 million. So $4 million to provide the current level of service to our students, not adding new items. Actual revenues this year is $1.2 million. And so let's unpack what's contributing to this increased cost. The driving factors are transportation, special education services, not to demonize special education services, but as we uncover and determine what students need, those services cost resources. When we also talk about our commitment to our employees, the average increase year over year for employees rightfully earned is more than the average of what we're able to increase in terms of local revenue. And so what that means is that at the local level, we're able to ask for a maximum of 2% of the local fair share. Not 2% of your total budget, 2% of the local fair share, which comes through homeowner property tax. This is significantly below the 7% increase in transportation that is dictated by the state, the increases in healthcare costs, the increases in out-of-district tuition for students that have greater needs than what we have the capacity to service, general expenses, and so on and so on. And so Beth Ann is going to share a little bit more about how we came to these numbers, but we just wanted to make sure that we're illustrating what is our challenge. We will never be in a position where we will come to you and say that students aren't worth it. We will also never come to you and say that staff needs, staff salaries, staff increases are not worth it. You'll never hear us say that. What you're going to hear us talk about is how do we facilitate to the highest degree possible all of these needs, all of these challenges with the resources that we have at our disposal. Hence, the reason why we're going to continue to ask for the community to partner with us and districts across the state to really put the appropriate amount of pressure on the state to do a better job and to create a fairer and more equitable funding system for students, for teachers, for the community, for taxpayers, and the like. And so I'm going to shift over to Beth Ann, who's going to talk about the actual budget and the impact.
I'll go through this. That's right. So we started the budget process. We usually start in the fall. No surprise to anybody. But we had the administrators put their school budgets together well in advance, knowing that this was going to be a bad year. And then when we did get the state aid, what we did is Dr. McDowell and I went line by line through the budget several times. Anything that could be funded with expiring federal funds we're funding with expiring federal funds, meaning curriculum supplies, instructional supplies, Chromebooks, things that are not people, but they're one-stop purchase that we could use up the federal funds, legally and correctly, but that would save some money in next year's budget. So of those costs, about 1.3 million we were able to reallocate to grants to spend down the federal funds that are expiring in the fall, and to ensure that the curriculum leaders in the district had what they needed for their schools for next year. This is just our projected enrollment. We are hoping to open 3 new preschool classrooms. That's why you see an addition of 50 children in preschool. Overall, the district's seeing growth of about 72 children throughout the district. And just a little caveat on enrollment. Enrollment should have an effect on your state aid, and I say should. When you have a large enrollment increase, the state does give you what's called an enrollment adjustment, but 72 children on a population of about 2,500 isn't large enough to generate additional funds to the district. I think any additional child should generate additional funds to the district, so this is an argument I make at my county meetings continually, but it wasn't enough to generate an adjustment that we could use in this year's budget. Overall, this is a picture of our district revenue. Last year we had budgeted fund balance, which is basically excess surplus that I didn't spend in the previous year, of about 1.1 million. I didn't generate anything last year. Usually I try to generate about $1 million every year to bring forward into the budget to be used as a source of revenue. So before we even started, we had a shortfall of that million because when the auditors came out, they confirmed what I already knew, that our costs were through the roof. We were paying for what we were mandated to pay for, which is a good thing, but we did not generate any excess surplus to help us in future budget years. So we were starting with 0, which was basically a $1.1 million shortfall. Local tax levy is 48.5% of the budget. You can see down below state aid is about 28.52%. That number is important because when I believe I started in Collingswood all those many years ago, we were at about 33%. So the state is, it's maybe only 4 or 5%, but that 4 or 5% matters, especially in a year like we're having this year when the state is not funding us. Again, this is just... No. No. It's okay. There is going to be a part of the budget where we have public comment. Sorry. I heard somebody, I thought it was like Fred talking to me in the back. I'm like, what? This is just a little pie chart just so you can see. So about 50% of the district budget is made up of local taxes that we generate here from the local taxpayers of Collingswood. We can only increase that 48% by 2%. So to say you can increase your overall budget by 2%, we can really only increase our overall budget by just under 1%. District expenditures, we're still spending 64% on instruction, 16% on student services. Student services, that number has gone up since previous years. Again, the cost of transportation is exorbitant in the state, and what they are charging for us to transport our children to the programs that they require is absurd, for lack of a better word. The state limited our tax levy increase by 2%, but they published the CPI that busing companies could increase their busing contracts. That was published at 5.85%. So the state, the different silos don't communicate with each other. So I'm already obligated to increase certain lines of my budget well above CPI and well above what I'm allowed to generate. And then our administrative costs staying at about 9%. And again, here's just a pie breakdown, just so you see that a majority of our, no surprise to anyone, a majority of our expenditures does go to instruction and student services. And then the year-over-year comparison, this year we did generate a small healthcare adjustment, thank God. So the increase will be at 3%, but that's the most we're allowed to ask. So on a $39 million budget, the tax levy increase is $593,000. So the average house will see an increase of $135.95.
So it's important to make the numbers real, and so we want to move into what are our priorities. And so at the onset of this presentation, we talked about the support for a rigorous learning environment. And so being able to provide high quality, engaging, and differentiated instruction, adjusting our multi-tiered system of support. These are the most intensive supports to the students of greatest need. Support the expansion of our professional learning communities in different ways. In addition to taking a look at the effectiveness and the quality of professional development, while also mandating or while also addressing the mandated shifts in curriculum, specifically in literacy as well as mathematics. Reinforcing our student support model, which includes academics, school culture, and mental health. And then ultimately, how do we continue to build capacity to begin moving and shifting into becoming more inclusive in our classrooms? And so these are the investments. And so one of the pieces of community feedback that was pretty loud and pretty clear this current year was the removal of early dismissal as the option needed in order to provide collaborative planning time in PLC. And so the calendar that was approved eliminated all non-contractual early dismissal days in order to deliver on that promise to families. And the investments will also include new school schedules, elementary, middle, and high school, that includes protected teacher planning time during the school day without the need for early dismissals. Learning acceleration will continue to be invested in to provide targeted small group instruction to students. MTSS for levels Tier 2 and Tier 3, which are the most intensive supports, will be provided to select students in need. We will continue to maintain a high-quality special education, special services department. We currently support roughly 360 students with our child study team services. In addition to curricular tools, we will be updating the curriculum platform to one that is more educator-friendly, and we'll also be looking at all of the resources aligned with the new standards in literacy as well as mathematics. We will be shifting our administrative culture from evaluation to instructional coaching with observations and feedback, in addition to making sure that we continue with our investments in the foundational equity work. We will be extending that to instructional assistants and all new faculty and staff coming on this school year, in addition to what is also included on our agenda this evening, an updated code of conduct, while also expanding access to restorative justice training, as well as placing greater emphasis on positive behavior supports. In addition to leveraging the expertise between our elementary and secondary equity councils, we believe that this type of change really needs to manifest on campus and then permeate out. And so we will be supporting our elementary and secondary equity councils with additional training and support, and also giving them more opportunities for more site-based leadership. In addition, last year we made a good faith effort to move to a fairer and more equitable pay scale for our instructional assistants. Last year was part 1, and this year is delivering on that complete promise of part 2, and so we will be making a substantial investment to improve our instructional assistants compensation. And so district priority number 2, supporting our infrastructure. First and foremost, making sure that there is appropriate workspace for all of our faculty and staff. Recapturing educational space in schools, improving safety services and support, also looking at our annual facility updates based on our long-range facility plan, as well as planning for future facility needs, updates to our technology services and support, and then improving communication across the district. And so what do those investments look like? Addressing our classroom space concern, and so what was referenced earlier is the addition of high-quality early childhood preschool seats. We will also be very much engaged in community engagement over the next 6 months with our All In for Collingswood referendum planning and discussion. We will continue to focus on the ongoing projects articulated in our long-range facilities plan. We're also, based on feedback from our community, we're placing great emphasis on safe routes to schools, but we're not waiting until September of 2027 to begin that discussion. Those discussions have already begun because we want to make sure that every child within our community has a safe route to school, and there are things that we can do right now, which includes making updates to our biking policy, adding the opportunity for partnership with other groups to help us with traffic studies, looking at traffic flow, but also looking at what we can do in partnership with the borough, with the state, and with the county in order to address some of the traffic concerns that we have as our children walk to school. Technology services, student and staff device replenishment. We are a one-to-one computing environment, and this demands that we continue to move out broken or non-functional equipment and replenish that year over year, and so we're making those investments. We'll also be updating our Chromebook policy as well as the deployment policy, in addition to making strategic changes to our technology services team to be able to streamline customer service and shorten the window in response time. In addition to making sure that we crank up our cybersecurity protocols and our faculty, staff, and student data protections. In addition to cranking up our communication support, media outlet engagement, website development, as well as social media support. And so I'm going to tag back in Beth Ann to talk about what are all of the cost-saving measures that we use in order to make sure that every possible dollar reaches our students.
All right, so no surprise to anybody here. The last couple of years, Dr. Principato's done a phenomenal job of getting a bunch of grants. So a lot of our one-time expenditures, we could put through the grant so it doesn't affect local taxpayers. We're members of the Schools Health Insurance Fund and the Burlington County Joint Insurance Fund. Last year, part of the $1.1 million that we were able to put towards the budget as excess surplus, about half of that came as a result of the refunds from both of these joint insurance funds. To date, neither insurance fund has declared a dividend, and most likely will not do it until the summer. So I didn't have anything to declare to put on the budget at this time. But usually we do see some money come back into the district because we are co-owners of the fund. Utilities, we are in the ACES program for utility consortium. We do every co-op under the sun for all of our purchases. It goes without saying that we do the most shared services, I think, if not Camden County, probably South Jersey at this particular point. We do a lot, obviously, with Oakland School District, but we do a lot with neighboring school districts that don't have a full maintenance team and a full technology team. So we are able to outsource our people, and it does bring in a little bit of income into the district. It brings about anywhere from $50,000 to $60,000 that I bring into the district budget every year as income. So it is a small little source of income, but it's also a source of pride for this district. We use Camden County Ed Services Commission for transportation. Borough of Oakland comes and does our trash at about $10,000 less than we were paying previously when we had to outsource it. And then just by offering high quality preschool and addressing all of our student needs, and we share a lot with Oakland with regards to our preschool development, our preschool training, mental health services. We're able to help both districts, all of the children within the two towns with the same budget draw. So, and I'm assuming a PDF version of this presentation will be on the website, but this is how you can kind of help us. Once we get through the budget season, we're going to crank up our advocacy. I've already volunteered as tribute to many state senators to speak in Trenton on behalf of the suburban school districts that are kind of getting strangled in the middle. You know, we also need state funding. You know, we also provide services, and we are also worthy. So hopefully you feel the same way, and please help me help Collingswood, and help me get this in front of the lawmakers. It's kind of died down a little bit, but he does have to pass his budget by June 30th, so I think the louder we are, I don't think we should go away just because his budget's going to be passed on June 30th. I think we need to stay very vocal and very much in the front of this, so we don't have another budget year that's as bad as this one. And that's it. Put this back over there.
Okay, so we went into committee of the whole prior to the presentation so that, to allow the board to be able to ask some questions about the presentation and the effects or the impacts that this year's budget cycle will have on our community. So I'm going to turn it over to board members to get that started.
I just had a couple clarifying questions because I don't know if I was reading the slides correctly. Was that 23-24 was $3.4 million? That was more than the 22-23 cycle? And was the $4 million this year over the 22-23 or 23-24?
23, 24.
Okay.
Yeah, so before we even started looking at additional budget reductions, we had already reallocated about 1.3 million of one-time costs in the budget that we were able to either buy now or use out of the expiring funds from the federal government.
And really one more thing, follow-up. I think you talked about it briefly, but if there's any, can you explain to everybody what that 3.4 million and 4 million, like where are a lot of those costs coming from? I know transportation went up, but can you give us some like concrete examples of what we're facing?
I'm going to get on my soapbox now. A lot of the costs that are in this budget, there's not a lot of discretionary things in this budget. Just about everything in this budget is mandated by someone somewhere. What made this budget year so challenging was Parkview has new ownership, as we all know, and they are going through the process of evicting families for non-payment. But what happens in a town that has apartment complexes is that when a family is evicted and the child is in our school district, we're still fiscally responsible for them for 1 full year. So right now I'm tracking about 16 children, so we're fiscally responsible wherever they wind up. They can come back to Collingswood, or we can opt to pay tuition, but that's a cost that was not in last year's budget. So the cost for that tuition is in this budget. Special ed services, the increased salaries for the aides, all of that is in the budget, and all of it worthy, right? So it's really hard when you go line by line through this budget, and nobody wants to be in this position, believe me, and it's been a lot of sleepless nights with Fred and I, but it's kind of like there's some things like charter schools, I'm mandated to pay. The state just goes in and charges me. They tell me how much is going to come out of my budget for charter schools, and we really don't have a say in any of that.
So that's, did you say that's for 1 year? So next year may be a little better because you're statutorily mandated to pay for these children for 1 year?
1 year unless they move again.
And then we're responsible again? Or the district?
Possibly. We do have some people that skip around, so unless they get a permanent residence in another place, then no. But if they move around, then yeah. It's the last place of permanent residence that will be tagged with paying the tuition and transportation. So there's just some costs that are new to the budget, and just some that they're fixed, but the costs are just outgrowing my ability to raise taxes. That's the structural problem.
Oh, go ahead, sorry. I was going to say, can both of you talk to us a little bit about, I know we have a special meeting on May 7th to discuss, or to vote more about the personnel, or approved personnel, I should say. But that's, personnel is a huge part of our budget, a very important part of our budget, and I know is on the minds and hearts of all of us, and most likely everyone listening as well. So can you just talk to us a little bit about what we can expect there, what we can talk about right now?
So yes, so in terms of the details, I can talk about process. And so the process was looking at the number of reductions that we were anticipating just based on the math, and this was an estimate. And so those numbers have been shared with all of our Education Association leadership teams. And so then the next part of that process is sitting down with school leaders and then looking at what's the impact and how do we maintain a continuity of service across all schools given the fiscal challenges that we face. And these are all tough choices, and so I don't want us to be disillusioned in any measure. These are not decisions that we want to make. These are decisions that we are forced to make at this particular moment in time. And so collecting the information from our school leaders who have been deliberating, and then going back to our association leadership teams and discussing what the impact will be and who will be impacted. And so in a reduction in force, there are outcomes and then there are unintended outcomes. And one of the unintended outcomes is that in general, the individuals that are most affected are also the least impactful on the budget because they are generally your non-tenured, lower on the salary scaled employees, which then requires a deeper level of reduction. And so we want to make sure that we are not damaging our school's ability to provide a continuity of service on every campus in our efforts. And so we know that we still have some work to do. And so we will have a much better sense of who is impacted within the next 24 to 48 hours. And then we'll be working collaboratively with our association leadership to talk about process of notification. And then our goal is to make sure that all of these details are worked out, ready for the May 7th appointments, so that contracts can be issued to all staff before the May 15th deadline.
So to clarify, what you're saying is you still don't know what the impact is going to be on things like programming, class sizes, even without those specific conversations with leadership. Can you tell us, just in terms of the dollars, what kind of impact that's going to have on, class sizes and programming and things like that?
We're not there yet.
So is this going to be, will we be voting on those specific questions or being informed of those specific questions on May 7th, or will those conversations already have happened by May 7th?
I try to answer. Tonight, you're approving the final budget. So the dollar amount is the dollar amount. As far as next week, we have a statutory obligation to notify all staff by May 15th. So next week, we'll be approving the staffing throughout the entire school district next Tuesday. So you're asking if there's going to be a meeting of the board between now and then? I want to understand your question, so I answer it quickly.
Oh, absolutely. No, so are we going to be made aware of these? Because you say that there's going to be collaboration between yourselves and building leadership and union leadership and things like that. So is our board members going to be made aware of those discussions and the results of those discussions before we are asked to vote on something on May 7th, is my question.
So let me make sure I'm providing clarity. And so the movement that will take place, no, that won't be something that will be voted on. The board is voting on the actual dollars. In terms of the who, the what, the where, the process is really driven by by the collective bargaining agreements. And so the impact on programming, we will not be in a position to give a complete, detailed summary of all programmatic impact, but just based on the timeline. We will be able to provide that by the next full board meeting publicly. And so there's still lots of details. And so we're looking at, there's one part, there's the personnel challenges that we have, and then there's the actual impact once we've identified personnel. And so that's kind of our process. What I will say is that the state, the preliminary budget has already been approved by the state. And so what we're looking at is the final approval to come from the board in terms of the dollars received and the dollars going out. And then the budget impact, we're going to need a little bit more time in order to discuss that.
I had a question. Beth Ann, this might be more for you. In terms of, listening to your presentation, and I apologize, I didn't see that ahead of time, so I'm just trying to follow through with what you said. That $1.3 million in grants were reallocated. Can you help the public understand how grant money gets reallocated? Because I have a very limited understanding of grants in terms of like, when you submit a grant, you have to be, from what I understand, really specific about what you're sending that money to or what you're spending that money on. So how are we
Sure.
reallocating that money? And the part two of that question, and this might be something for you, Fred, is are we looking at, given that that money has been reallocated, from grants or to grants or whatever, are we looking at an additional $1.3 million next year that we're going to be finding ourselves in more of a crisis?
So the grants weren't reallocated. It was costs that were identified by all the building administrators when they worked on their budgets of things that they wanted that we couldn't pay for in next year's budget, right? So we probably, in the last few months, you've been seeing a lot of amendments to the ESSER grants that we've been putting on the agenda. We've been amending the grants so that we can include these costs. So for things like curriculum supplies, we probably about $160,000, $170,000 worth of curriculum items that were identified, most notably at the high school level. We were able to pay out of the expiring ESSER grants. This way, like the Spanish program has what they need, everybody has what they need for next school year, because there's some things that we just have to purchase, right, for instruction. So, and we do that with the hope of every $100,000 I can reallocate, I'm saving a person. So we went line by line. We were able to, we had some SDA funds from the state that we received late last year. That's some of the projects that Keith, our former buildings grants director, he had next year's budget I cut out, and I used those SDA funds for those purposes. So anything that we were able to say, it's a one-time purchase, let's put it to this grant, that's what we did. So I didn't reallocate the grant itself, I just moved the expenditure because it's a one-time thing.
In this budget, have we spent down all of those ESSER funds that we needed to?
We're getting close. We have until, I think everything has to be committed by August with September final report deadline. But yeah, Karen Principato is working on that diligently to make sure that we're spending everything down. That's why I keep amending the grants like crazy, because if it's something that I can put in a grant, like one of the things we were talking about was the SLO last month. The SLO was in the budget. I took it out of the budget, and it's now in the federal grant that we got for the Fed for safety and security. So the SLO is not in the general fund budget, it's grant funded now. Things like that. Like if I could take it out, I did. Okay.
So to follow up, do you suspect that we're going to find ourselves in a bigger hole next year?
That's hard to predict. I wish I had a crystal ball. I never would have predicted that when they came up with the funding formula that we have now, that it was going to be so poor. Because we fared very well in the beginning of it, right? We were a suburban district, we were doing everything we were supposed to be doing, yay! But they just flat funded us for 3 years, and with the demands and the costs and the needs, we just can't keep doing this. So I have no idea what the new funding formula is going to look like. I had volunteered numerous times to speak. Nobody's called me back, by the way, but I will continue to speak. So I honestly don't know what the funding formula is going to look like, but I don't know what the things I reallocated are one-time things. So I don't know what additional one-time things are going to pop up next year that we might need. Like, is it going to be a textbook series or software? That's hard to predict. So this year we had a very clear list from the schools as to things that they wanted and or needed for their programs that we were very easily able to peel off and apply to a grant that was expiring.
Okay, I appreciate you clarifying that.
No problem.
I have one other real quick thing. You mentioned something about we have a district bus for class trips. Can you tell me more about that?
Not
believe
class
that
trips.
I believe that
It's
was
the
in the
18 to 21-year-old program. It's the vocation.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay.
I had a follow-up question about the grants, because I know in some of our grants, like the SLO, for instance, I know a portion of, I believe, the assistant superintendents of curriculum's salaries is being paid through some of the grants. So for those that we're using for those purposes, is your hope, because we know we need those people, we also know we needed the one-time purchases as well, is the hope that what you just said about that the funding formula, they slowly begin to right the ship a little bit. So therefore, while yes, we are funding some of these people through grants for now, it's better than laying off a teacher or someone else in this meantime, hoping that that budget rights itself a bit. I don't know if that made enough sense.
It does. It's hard. I like to plan, but the state is so bipolar in what they say and then what they actually do that it makes it really hard. But yeah, I would like to think that, the new assistant superintendent, she's not in the budget because she is being paid out of different grants. When those grants expire, yeah, she's going to have to be brought into the general fund. I don't know, we might get new grants. I mean, we're constantly applying for new grants, right? Because that's the only place I can get money right now. But yeah, I would like to plan for the future as much as I possibly can. But the state's not making it very easy.
Beth Ann, could you talk a little bit about, I know some of our neighbors had experienced significant cuts, Palmyra and Runnymede, and they were able to get these reversed through different appeals processes. Can you just talk a little bit about what we did to understand where our numbers came from the state, to understand why we received the amount that we did?
Sure, and I see Joan from the retrospect here, so I'm put it really big. So what I did is I reached out to the BA in Runnymede, who I'm friendly with, and he said he had done an Oprah request to the Department of Treasury to get, so in the state funding formula, Treasury provides to the Department of Ed the income of each town, and that's based on everybody's New Jersey state tax returns, right? So you would assume it's just an upload and not somebody doing this, but I'm beginning to think it's somebody doing this. And then the same thing with the ratables, right? It's supposed to be an upload. He did an Oprah request because he couldn't believe that the income in Runnymede went up so much that it cost the school district to lose millions of dollars. So lo and behold, their income numbers were completely wrong. Same thing with Palmyra. So I sent an Oprah request, and I downloaded the Oprah request, and I literally sent it to all the BAs in Camden County. And lo and behold, I got ours back. And for Collingswood and Oak Lynn, they're both wrong. But they're not wrong like a sizable amount. Collingswood, I think, was like 70,000, and Oak Lynn was off like 40,000. But my argument, which I sent to the state, was if it's wrong for Palmyra and Runnymede and Collingswood, Oak Lynn, my assumption is it's wrong for just about everybody, and the state should rerun the formula for all 600 plus school districts. The answer I'm getting is, well, there will be winners and losers. Well, because they're going to have to reallocate state aid again, right? So they were doing it like on a case-by-case basis. Now they're not taking any more appeals. So I reiterated it with, so every year when I get my state aid, so I can talk to my community and to have faith in the numbers I'm being given, I'm going to have to do an Oprah request to assume that what Trenton is sending me is correct. And I never got a reply, so I'm assuming that's the answer. So I'm just telling all the BAs in Camden County, and it wasn't like a lot, but my point is it's wrong. So when you've got people that are trying to do the best they can for their communities, and we're literally pinching our pennies together, you better be right, is my point. And so I intend to continue to push, so.
Could you speak a little bit, I know, and Fred, I don't know if this is for you or Beth Ann, the presentation focused a lot on rigor, which is obviously very important. However, with proposed staff reductions, can you just speak a little bit about how we can maintain rigor while also facing these challenges of staffing, particularly when we are still hurting from last year with the amount of staff reductions we had?
So first, I think that it's making sure that we prioritize instruction, but also making sure that we are dispelling the myths or the old adage that we continue to hear, oh, we have to do more with less. Wrong. We have to do less with less. And so when we have less resources, we have to get very specific and tailored in our approach, and that has to manifest at the local school level. And so one of the strategies that we're going to be employing in order to support this is making sure that every school schedule protects teacher time so that they can look at data, they can make instructional and informed decisions, they can look at resources, they can collaborate with their colleagues. Educators need time in order to do their work, and they shouldn't have to stay after school in order to do that. We also want to make sure that we are providing data tools, resources to them so that they're not having to go and search for the information, which then occupies even more of their time. We also want to make sure that we're moving away from cycles of evaluation and then really drilling down and making sure that our administrative teams in every building and all of our supervisors are really walking alongside our educators in order to make sure that instructional improvement is the area of focus. We're not ignoring social and emotional learning. We're not ignoring school culture, but they're two sides of the same coin. And so culture is important, but rigor and relevance and high expectations is equally important. And so we want to make sure that we're changing the narrative and flipping that balance. In addition to making sure that the curricular tools are appropriate and useful to our educators so that they're not having to continue to curate additional resources. And so the more operational minutia we can remove from the plates of our educators, the more they can focus on the kids in this community. And so when we talk about rigor, rigor is not a destination, it's a continual pursuit. How do we make sure that the cognitive load or the level of academic weight and work is shared equally between the students and the staff? And so that's what we're going to be shifting in this new iteration.
Oh, absolutely. I agree that these are all important, but if we physically have less people and, the same consistency of student enrollment, how are we, I would just like to hear how we're going to bridge that gap, because that's going to be a challenge, specifically with numbers of reductions that we're looking at.
I mean, I believe I've answered the question. I mean, what's the alternative? To not have a rigorous environment. And so I would think that at the end of the day, building internal capacity for our educators to do their work in the most streamlined way is our course of action.
Any other budget questions from the board?
I just had a quick question on enrollment. I know you mentioned that we have an additional 72 kids coming in for pre-K, which is awesome. And I think our universal is 300, you said, right? A couple times? 300 is our universal pre-K. That's our number. How close are we to that 300, I guess, is my first question. The second question is, do we have any idea, like if there are any students that are going to be leaving the district come June that's going to potentially impact our numbers for next year?
Well, the good news is, the one thing Trenton doesn't do is, so preschool's funded through a preschool grant. They don't take the money back if the kids don't show up. So that's a good thing. So we're still going to get the funding, yeah, exactly, with our 3 additional classrooms, which is fantastic. As far as what the universe is going to be, that changes literally every single year, because all Trenton does is they look at, I think it's grade 1, and then like they double it. And they say, that's how many preschool we think you're going to have. It's really not very scientific, but it does change every single year. But I would put us at the high 2s, low 3s, because we've always kind of hovered right around there.
In terms of like enrollment for next year, do we have any idea on how that's going to impact our numbers?
Regular enrollment? I don't know. I'll know better. It's hard to say. I'll know better in September. We start counting enrollment, but usually preschool and kindergarten enrollment, that's being done right now, and then usually we see a mad dash to enrollment in like August. So September board meeting, October board meeting, on Fred's enrollments, you'll start to see kind of like what our actual numbers are looking like.
Okay, thank you everyone for, we hope that some of that was a bit more clarifying for everyone listening. We wanted to shift now to the other topic that we wanted to cover during Committee of the Whole. While the board can't engage in public discussion about the racial bias incidents that have occurred at the high school, we believe that it is important that as a board we discuss, ask questions that are more aligned with our role in the district, which involve more systems and structures and policy. So we wanted to take some time to talk about that part of it, because that is more of what we have control over and are able to focus on. So Dr. McDowell, if you could talk to us a little bit about the systems and structures that first of all, I wanted to start off by saying I don't think any of us up here are under the impression that these issues can be solved quickly. We've been doing this work for a long time now, and to dismantle structural racism in a school system is not something that can happen overnight or even in a year. But if you could talk a bit about what systems we have been putting into place already, and what extra things we are looking to add to try to support that work, as well as, most importantly, as we are trying to dismantle these systems, how are we supporting the students that are currently in our schools being affected by these issues? So kind of a two-pronged question for you.
Okay. So first and foremost, I'm going to paraphrase some of the information that we have shared, because I think that it's extremely important for us to first acknowledge this is not exclusively a school district problem. This is a community issue that we need to acknowledge, we need to deal with. Acknowledgement is the first step to coming to a solution. And so for the first time in a significant period, the borough, the police department, the Board of Education, and the school district came together to really talk about this core institutional, historical, and multi-generational problem in Collingswood. And so as community leaders, it is important that we acknowledge the hurt, the pain, and fear associated with the allegations, but also recognize the impact that it has on our residents, adults, and children. And so we also want to make sure that we are being crystal clear that there is a strong commitment to focus on first healing, but also building off of work that we have done and will continue to do and invest in order to create a more inclusive and understanding community. And so this process is going to be long and arduous, but it requires honesty, openness, empathy, and courage in order to make meaningful progress. And so Collingswood, just like many communities, unfortunately, are not immune to the harmful effects of structural racism. We encourage parents, community members to talk to their children, their friends, their neighbors about racism, about biases in multiple forms, and the profound effect that it has on all of us. This is not a black and white issue. This is a community issue. This is a national issue. This is something that we're going to have to deal with as a civilized society. And so in the upcoming weeks, we're going to make a few investments, but I want to talk very quickly about some of the things that we've done. We recognized that there were some systemic challenges last school year when students exercised their voice in peaceful protest over the disproportionality and the mistreatment that they reported happening as it relates with our code of conduct. Students were outside. They were sharing their voice because there were no formal mechanisms last year for them to report incidents. We immediately corrected that based on direct feedback from community members as well as our students, and then we brought in outside legal counsel in order to do the investigations that were submitted last school year. And then we also surveyed faculty and staff in order to get a sense of the knowledge, the beliefs, and systems of support in place so that we could begin making strategic investments among faculty and staff. And so that birthed a partnership with A to Z Equity Consulting, which is a consulting firm housed with the Case Center at Rowan University and led by some of the professors that have been engaged in that important work for the last 25 to 30 years. And we started looking at how do we begin to address meaningful change. And we identified it starts with policy, people, and then practice. And so at first, we had to go to the board because it starts at the top. And so the board last school year developed and approved an anti-racism policy that becomes the foundational document for all of our future work. That was approved last school year. Focused off of that work was the partnership with A to Z Equity Consulting, because based on the survey data that we got from our faculty and staff, there were resources, there was learning that needed to take place, and we wanted to make sure that we were creating a space for folks to not ignore the tension, but to productively learn, grow, have additional resources, additional language, and then have an opportunity to process with experts. And so we were able to take 250 of our faculty and staff that were certificated through 4 modules or units of study in Equity Foundation, and they had the opportunity to unpack with professionals. That's the first step, making sure that we have common language on all of our campuses about this important subject area. Often, we don't know what we don't know, and it's important for us to continue to learn. So as an educational institution, we all have to be learners. And so the next phase was to establish how are we going to continue building capacity on our campuses. And so we first established a secondary equity council of educators to be able to lead this important work at the middle and the high school. And then we added that next step of elementary. And so we know that meaningful change does not always happen from the top down, but it happens from the middle out. And so we know that we need to have educators across every campus that are leading these really important discussions and helping us to make better decisions that affect each campus. And so paired with that level of work, we will continue with that work because we knew that we were not able to get to all of our faculty and all of our staff, specifically our instructional assistants, which accounts for roughly 120 educators that work in and out of our schools. And so we know that there are still groups of staff that need this critical work and this additional support. And so we will be making that available to folks. We'll also be providing targeted professional development and ongoing support with opportunities for campus-based leadership with our equity councils at the elementary and the secondary level. In addition to making restorative justice training available to more staff during their workday, also looking at what additional bias training is available and making sure that we have a crystal clear lens of what is and is not acceptable to be able to show dignity and respect to all of the members within our community. Paired with our partnership with the borough and the community, in the upcoming weeks, we know that it's important to provide additional resources and focus on deeper community engagement. And so we will be working with the New Jersey Division of Civil Rights in order to provide public organizing workshops in Collingswood to do a deep dive into anti-bias topics, in addition to making sure that we are developing practical strategies of the prevention of bias, harassment, and discrimination. These will be hosted by the borough with sessions beginning on May 21st and at the Senior Community Center, and on June 4th at the Perkins Center for the Arts. Additionally, when you talk about restorative justice, the first stage of restorative justice is community building. The second stage is response to harm. And so on May 16th at 7 o'clock, the school district as well as the Collingswood Community DEI Committee will host a panel discussion entitled Amplifying Black Voices. This will provide an opportunity to hear directly from Collingswood residents of color. And so moreover, this continued collaboration will also include the development of a community website, which we will be launching in the upcoming weeks, early in May, which will have additional resources, upcoming and ongoing events, and then updates about how we're going to cultivate a culture of inclusivity while we all work collaboratively as a community to combat structural racism. In addition to, we are making available the New Jersey Bias Crimes Hotline. We'll be posting all of that information as well, in addition to how students or parents can report harassment, intimidation, and bullying incidents on the homepage of our district website. And so there are 2 areas where students have direct access to report incidents. One would be anything that they believe constitutes an affirmative action claim, and then also any student that believes that they are experiencing an incident of harassment, intimidation, or bullying. And so this is a long road. We're talking about the long game. We're not talking about silver bullets or quick wins or simple solutions. We're talking about complex challenges within our community, and we do not have all of the answers today. But we do believe that through collective effort and shared responsibility, we can dismantle the systemic barriers to create a more equitable system where all within our community have a sense of belonging.
Thank you for that. Can you, I thought I had remembered hearing this in a meeting, or maybe a committee meeting that we had had, is something, one of the things that Dr. Zion is going to work with us, that's the A to Z coaching, is a student voice piece to help elevate or give them a space to kind of unpack these issues themselves.
Yes. So we started, when we went down this road, we knew that we needed a multi-tiered, multi-stepped approach to the dismantling of some of these systemic barriers to the young people and community members. And so we knew that we needed to start at the board level. And so we brought in outside consultants to provide targeted professional development to the board, and we began engaging in this work at the board level. Parallel to that, we've been having ongoing discussions and training at the district level among school and district administrators. Pair that with the professional development for the staff, that also speaks to the people piece. And so the board is responsible for the development of policy. The district was responsible for the development of people, but there was a group that was missing in a lot of that work, and we want to make sure that we are addressing that. And that's how do we bring students into the discussion and provide opportunities for students to lead on their campus, specifically because they are the recipients of everything that we're trying to put in place. And so we will be leveraging our partnerships with A to Z. We'll also be leveraging some of their partnerships. And our focus is how do we elevate student voice so that students are able to dig deeper into these challenging topics and also be integral in the development of solutions that we will then also implement on our campuses. And so we'll be working with some of the student leadership groups on campus to begin that extremely important work in the near future.
Sorry, sir, you have to wait for public comment. I'm sorry, we just have a certain structure we have to follow, that's all. We have a certain structure we have to follow for, so yeah.
Public comment.
There's just a specific structure we have to follow, so we have to have our conversation, and then there's a section for public comment.
So I'm thinking back to, I think before I first joined this board, I had the chance of talking to some school district personnel who talked about how students, especially students of color, especially black students in the district, have not in the past been very, say, active or involved in a lot of outside of school, like extracurricular type of activities, and these district employees are saying, hey, that's kind of a sign of disengagement, and trying to figure out how to solve that. And then looking at some of the news reports recently that were specifically citing student voices, you know, I felt when I was reading it, I was hearing, hey, like, these are students who are saying that they're not sure that their voices would be heard even if they spoke up, right? So again, still that idea of, you know, of disengagement because, you know, potentially these students don't feel that they belong. I ask that because, you know, I wonder, one, we can have these student voice pieces, which I think are really important, but, you know, folks also need to feel as if that piece is worth it, right? And I say folks, I mean students. And I wonder, like, what is being done kind of in the interim to address this feeling of not belonging that these students are bringing up. I mean, one question specifically, for example, with the revelation about the white student union group at the high school, I mean, has there been assembly led by like staff and admin to address that with the students? You know, things like that. Like, what are some of the ways that we've been working to help all students feel valued and heard in the district.
So the high school will be working to be able to address that core component. And so I'm not making an excuse, but I also need we need to put it in its appropriate perspective. And so, for example, starting tomorrow, students are engaged in state level testing. And so we'll be moving there. And so I think that there is not an avoidance of the topic. I do believe I've met with the leadership at both the middle school and the high school. They're looking for the appropriateness and the timing to begin addressing some of these, but they have already engaged some of the student leaders on campus. We have several student groups that are currently operating on campus, and now is the time to be able to leverage student expertise. And so I can share that the administration is looking at how do we more effectively partner so that we elevate those voices.
I'm glad that you just said that, because my comment was just going to be, I have an enormous amount of respect and faith in our district leadership in terms of the building admins, and I want to make sure that we are not stepping on their toes and trying to solve this problem for them, because I think they know what they're doing, and I think a lot of the staff in the buildings know what they're doing. I think we just need to make sure we're supporting them and getting behind them and what they need.
I do just want to comment to make sure that, like, regardless in the end, right, our focus should be on making sure that all of our kids' needs are met, right? And so whatever we need to do, I think I'm in support of that.
Oh, I was just going to say, I have two questions. And just kind of to piggyback on this comment, I think well, I do value the importance in reaching out to student leaders. I do think that going back to what Roger's point about hearing from all students is incredibly important, especially if we have an engagement issue. And I know everyone is like fatigued from surveys, but there are a number of services that South Jersey schools have used, including sense of belonging surveys, that can be distributed effectively. If all students are in testing mode already, I don't know why, if they're already on laptops, this is a great opportunity to collect data, both anecdotal and quantitative. And I do believe that our faculty and staff are doing an excellent job, but I do believe that there is a massive problem with how some of these problems are being articulated and how those problems are being articulated to the top level. If this is where we are, where there is a group that is founded as a supremacist group, then I think that there has to be a larger catch-all than just addressing student leaders and hearing from a wider base of students. And that was my first just comment, more than anything. I'm interested in what you said about these equity councils. I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit more about how they're composed. Are they teachers? Are they staff? What kind of their function is? Do they have goals? And how they are being mobilized, especially right now, because I do think that there is a sense of urgency at this second.
So we're not denying that there's a sense of urgency, but I also need to make sure that we are tempering expectations. And so the equity councils are going through targeted training, targeted support from the consultancy group. They are in the process of establishing their goals. And so we should expect to receive those very, very soon. And so I think that when challenges come, we're looking for an immediate response. We've tried an immediate response, and we have failed miserably year over year. And so because it has often been reactive. And so there is a cadence to how change happens, and we're trying to be mindful. And so the professionals that we've brought in order to help mentor and support staff are helping us think through that. We're trying to escalate the timeline given this particular circumstance. But these are very complex issues. And so I also want to make sure that I'm being very clear. And so the alleged group, no matter our personal opinions, we are a place of learning. And what we experienced were mistakes have been made by young people on campus. And so, but the level of organization that some of our media outlets have characterized is simply not true. And so I just want to make sure that we don't continue to fill in the blanks with our own additives to this scenario. Now, we are not condoning any level of behavior of this kind, but I also need for us to be very mindful that we are a place of learning, and young people will, as they always have, make mistakes. And so we want to make sure that from a learning perspective, we're not just addressing those who have done harm, but we also want to make sure that we're addressing those who have been the recipients of said harm. And this is going to require a level of expertise that we do not currently have the internal capacity to do on our own. And so we've brought in outside professionals and continue to bring in different partners in order to be able to address these very quickly, but we don't have all of the answers today.
I just really want to stress that just thinking about what you just said, that I feel like as a district, we have tended to focus more on those that have done harm and not those that were harmed. And I think I really want us to, as quickly and responsibly as possible, ensure that we are meeting the needs of the students who have been harmed. Because that is what I think we have failed miserably at year after year.
I'd also like to jump in and you know, talking about the alleged group and so forth, that is concerning, right, that group existed. I think for me, equally or even more concerning is reports of frankly casual racism, right, like comments made in passing throughout the day to students of color. And you know, I don't know that, frankly, I don't know that I have a question for you, more of just that, for me, that seems just as, if not even more concerning than, you know, one group, right? Because I think a group, it's easy to highlight and say and then address. The basic level of how we interact with each other, though, is, I think, much harder to address and something that is going to take time, and I think this board is definitely behind working towards.
I completely agree, and so I think that it's extremely important that when students come to us and say that they are experiencing something, I believe it's incumbent that we believe them. And so I think that, but also, we do our students a disservice by not including them in the development of solutions that affect their day-to-day. And so for the record, and just to make sure that we are all crystal clear, the types of behavior that has been alleged, albeit casual or not, is unacceptable behavior in any measure. And so we do not believe that discrimination, bias, disrespect, or harassment of any kind is acceptable in our schools. And so we're going to continue to root out those behaviors and then figure out what's the pathway forward, specifically through the lens of the young people who have been harmed.
So I want to, again, just point out and thank you for leading this conversation. And it is an incredibly difficult topic, but I think it's important that us at the board level are having this out in public and wrestling with just how difficult and complex this is, and the points that you've made about this not being short-term fixes. I think we've gotten some good presentations, even just this year and in the past, from school leaders about the culture plans that are happening in buildings. And I think a push to have more of the direct work that we're seeing that is aligned to our push to be an anti-racist school district, and how they're taking that on in a building level, and how we can be using policy to help them to do that. I think that's helpful for us at the board to understand what their goals are going into the year, and then to help check on progress to make sure that we don't get to a moment like this again in the spring where we're having to be reactive to this, and then having to ask questions about what's happening there and not being able to say, here's what we know has been happening.
To that point, also really appreciate the conversation we're all having. And I think in light of the idea of really focusing on prevention and being proactive, another thing I think the board would very much be behind, and maybe we'd like to hear a little bit more about, is, we know, as you've said repeatedly, and I think is important to reiterate, is that this is slow, right? Slow work. There are things that have to happen now, but there's a lot more that's slow. And so I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about your thinking around going a little further, I don't know if it's up or downstream, but thinking about this work in elementary schools in our district, middle school most certainly, and just thinking about, yes, this is showing its face mostly in the high school, but what can we be doing earlier on in students' academic careers in our district? We're a small district, right? So how can we maybe put some systems into place that would get students talking about these issues earlier?
Kate, can I jump on that real quick and say I think that the PTAs, I've talked to a lot of the PTAs in town and heard from them, and we would be on board with helping with that as well.
So, extremely important question and topic, and I think that having a conversation about prevention without addressing some of the structural barriers that are preventing some of those authentic conversations to happen is part and parcel for, and I'm not giving a PSA, I'm just referencing, is part and parcel for some of the reasons behind the All-In for Collingswood. And so when we talk about what are some of the structural barriers that are preventing young people from coming together in a meaningful way, that really starts with the configuration of our schools, one, opportunities for students to come together in a constructive way, two, and then how do we appropriately make sure that every single campus mirrors the diversity within our school community, three. And so when we talk about bringing young people together sooner rather than later, yes, starting to have these discussions when children are 7 or 8 is better than when they're 17 or 18. There is a much higher degree of positive change that can come. And so I think that we will be taking our schools and our PTAs up on their offer to begin engaging in this important work. I would like to just give a quick shout out. We had challenges one of our elementary schools, and the PTA was integral in engaging their specific school community this year in some of those challenging conversations. And so I think that we know that it can happen, but it will require a much greater degree of coordination and attention in order for us to start having these discussions sooner rather than later.
Actually, on that topic, so something I was thinking of, I appreciate that, starting fall of 2027, the hope is to, as you said, to have the elementary schools through the referendum mirror the diversity of our community. As a board and, district leadership, isn't that something that we can do now? I mean, do we have to wait till 2027? I know in years past, there were moves at the board level to take a look at mapping in the town where students go. We know that they don't always get to go to the school right around the corner because, maybe it's full or, there might be other considerations. Is that something in terms of helping our elementary schools to mirror some of that diversity? Is that work that as a board we can start doing now? We can start doing in the fall?
Well, so I think that it's not, because if it were, we would have already done that. And so I think that when we look at the structural barriers that currently are preventing us from doing some of these things, that's the reason why we're coming to the community with a comprehensive proposal to begin addressing some of that important work. And so I think that the types of change that are needed really requires a degree of flexibility in facilities that we currently do not have. And so hence the reason why we've been engaged in this topic of discussion within our community around community investment to begin moving in a direction that adds a layer of flexibility as it relates with the buildings and then provides us opportunities to begin engaging in what it could look like in terms of how the schools mirror our community.
Sure, and believe me, I understand that. I just remember when my kids were going to elementary school, we were told that we're not guaranteed any one particular building and there needs to be some flexibility. I just wondered if in small incremental steps, would it be possible to begin some of that work with the hopes that it could be a more immersive process later after the facilities referendum is passed?
I think we've done that to the extent that we can without a full upheaval. We have, when I started on the board, the entire Parkview complex was sent to Sharp. They were in fact one of the only places on this side of the White Horse Pike that was sent to Sharp. Everyone else had been positioned to go to different schools for reasons that everyone can figure out on their own, why it was only being sent to one school. In the years since then, we have switched things so that there's 4 buildings there. 2 of them are sent to Zane because the walk is much closer for them, and I believe 2 are still sent to Sharp. So that is a fairly substantial population of people that are not now all being sent to the same school. I would say beyond that, I think we could propose it. I'm not sure how happy the town would be with us if we did.
To be clear.
But go ahead.
To be clear, all students at Parkview attend all 5 elementary schools currently.
Right, yes, I'm sorry.
And in addition to that, one of the structural pieces, for example, that Dr. Abdal, I think, is talking about is, for example, our our English learner program, right, is currently at Garfield, right? And one of the pieces of having a bunch of different buildings is that it takes up a lot of resources to staff a bunch of different buildings. So if our ELL program is in one building, that automatically creates an issue in terms of trying to balance percentages, right? So structurally, there's a lot of underlying facilities issues that need to be addressed in order for there to be a chance of better balancing, I think, the demographics in the district. Just again, the ADA stuff, right? Like, again, if you can only send your students who need, sorry, my shoelace is untied, but if you only can send students who have accessibility issues to one building, then again, there's a challenge to how to balance out demographics within the district. And so those are some of the structural pieces that, yes, we can try to address those, but without actually addressing the structural underlying issues, we'll always be playing with a stacked deck.
Thank you for correcting me. I was thinking more when for kindergarten enrollment with Parkview, but you're absolutely right that they go to all 5 schools. Anyone else before you? Go ahead.
Yeah. So back to the recent instance. So for me personally, when I heard about the recent instance at the high school and also read some of the pieces reporting on specifically minority student experiences at the high school, I'll be frank. It in the grand scheme of things, like, I realized that I was not initially shocked because of my experience as a person of color growing up in America myself. But realizing that I wasn't initially shocked, I then had this question, which was, were we as a district shocked, right? Like, was this the first that we have heard of these issues? Have these type of issues, whether it be potential for a group or the day-to-day microaggressions and racism that might be happening during student interactions, for example, have those issues been elevated to the district by, say, the teachers and staff, by the admin, by students, or did this catch us off guard?
So the activities or lack thereof of the alleged student group caught us off guard. That was not something that we had anticipated or planned for. What I will say, what was planned for was based on direct feedback from the student leaders last year during the protests, were microaggressions, disproportionate behavior, inconsistencies in terms of the code of conduct, which then translated into the development of the DEI action items and the partnership for foundational professional development and coaching with A to Z Equity, the Equity Group, based on those core pieces. In addition to expanding with the Equity Councils. And so all of those core pieces originally manifested based on direct feedback from roughly 21 students that were the spokespersons for the protest last school year. And so a lot of this work has been a continuation of that, but then also going back to our school leaders and identifying where are the needs, what are the resources in order to be able to begin addressing some of these core pieces, and where is the flexibility for them to be able to do some of these things on campus, and then holding ourselves accountable for actually engaging in that work. And so in terms of, as a black man from the segregated South, was I shocked? No. Was I disappointed that some of our students and some of the children in this community were being harmed? Absolutely. I'm a father of two small children. My children are Afro-Latino, which means they represent multiple cultures. And so what I would say is that any child in this community that believes that they are not wanted or that cannot be themselves, regardless race, color, creed, whatever, we have a problem that we need to deal with. And so I think that part of our collective responsibility is to identify what the issues are and then put meaningful, long-term solutions so that we're not caught in the doom loop of the start and stop. And so one of the things I think that it's important for us to acknowledge is that systemic racism in Collingswood is not a last year problem. It's a 150-year problem. Now, we have made progress in the last 150 years. We've made progress in the last 45 years, especially given I had a conversation with one of the first black families to move into Collingswood last week as a result of this. They are going to be lending their expertise on the May 16th conversation, but to hear her experience from where we were 45 years ago would break your heart, because that's not the place that we know and love today. But it didn't shock me then. The situations that have happened over the last several years since I have been here as superintendent, albeit disappointing, does not dissuade us from our mission, which is to make sure that this is a fair and equitable place where all young people feel that they can be successful and where they belong. But it's a hard road. And we're going to have flare-ups. We're going to have setbacks. And so when we make progress, there's always a potential for us to fall back into bad habits. And what we're trying to do is we're trying to slowly move to a place where we don't continue to have the start and stops, and we definitely don't sweep things under the rug. And that has been our history.
Oh, I just wanted to reiterate, and you kind of covered it. I think you made this point earlier, this idea of this, frustratingly slow process, but in a spirit of being proactive rather than reactive is really important. And just to reiterate, I really am interested in this idea of the equity councils, their composition and their goals. And I feel like this is teachers are boots on the ground, maybe to alleviate some of that urgency at the central admin office. Like, I'd really like to see how they can be mobilized to support our students at all grade levels. Because I think, going to Roger's point about it's not just one larger event, but a cultural thing that needs to be addressed. So I would hope to see some goals from them in the coming meetings.
So the configuration of the equity councils, elementary and secondary, are school-based staff, teachers, administrators, instructional assistants, wherever appropriate. Our educators have an integral role in leading the change efforts on each of the campuses. And so this level of work is hard work, but it's also heart work, and it can't be mandated. And so it has to manifest authentically on campus, and the individuals that are closest to the challenge are better positioned to identify the solutions. And so, yes, Sarah, we will be waiting for the goals, the objectives that they would like to accomplish through the equity councils, but it really is at the school-based level. And then the responsibility of the school district is to make sure that the resources and the flexibility is there for them to be able to do this important work.
one more question, which is, what can we do as a board?
Well, I know the code of conduct work is one of the big things, because I know that our district administration has also asked for some more clarity and more, for their ability to be able to more consistently enforce it based on the reintroduction of restorative practices and things like that. And so kind of aligning it more with the 2024 way of thinking is one piece of it. But Dr. McDowell, I'll turn it over to you for anything else.
One of the board's primary functions is to continue to communicate our mission, our vision, and our values. But also the second piece is for us to aggressively tackle policy that leads to a better future for the young people and the families that we serve. And so the board first started with the anti-racism policy. Code of conduct is next. Code of conduct begins to address disproportionality. Code of conduct does not address the systemic cultural challenges on campus. And so we're going to need to do much deeper dives into, are there policies or practices that we need to dismantle that are preventing folks from really being able to come together in a meaningful way, and how do we do that in the best possible manner? And so we do have policies that talk about equality in education. We do have policies that talk about affirmative action. I don't think that we can stop there. And so I think that this is the unfortunate beginning of a much longer conversation that includes policy, practices, and then more specifically, resources at the school level, because our educators, they can't do this work by themselves.
I actually think that's a great thing to end on, just being mindful of time as well, that thank you to everyone for the conversation. This hasn't been our first committee of the whole discussion on this topic, and it absolutely won't be our last, and I think that's one of the important things that we as a board can do is ensure that this is not swept under the rug. This is not something that, an incident popped up and then we don't, talk about these systemic issues again. I don't think that's the way this board would function anyway. But we have a lot of work to do and more discussions to come. With that, can I get a motion to exit committee of the whole?
So moved.
And a second.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. So we went through all of our presentations. We're on section 5, which is future dates and miscellaneous information. Just wanted to draw your attention to the May 7th special board meeting at 6:30 back here. There are a variety of awards nights and concerts and PTA events, so please keep all of those in mind. Section 6, routine board business. I need a motion to approve the minutes of the March 19th, 2024 regular board meeting, the March 26th special board meeting, the April 9th, 2024, and the April 19th, 2024 special referendum meetings. Motion to approve all of those meetings.
So moved.
And second.
Second.
Roll call. All in favor? We are going to move Trey's student report presentation from section 9 up so that he can tell us what the students have been up to before we move on to public comment.
Well, the winter sports season has concluded, and the spring season is also wrapping up around this time. Among our spring sports teams this year was the new addition of a trial girls flag football team, which has in its short life already gotten a couple of wins. The spring's theatrical events have also concluded with 2 shows for Broadway night in which students perform songs from various musicals in a cabaret style. On the subject of the arts, the district will host its annual Art Awards this May 16th to honor the artistic achievements of our students. The American leg of the German exchange program wrapped up in May in what we hope was a culturally educational and enriching time for our German guests, who will themselves host some of our students this June. Our secondary campus language programs recently honored high-achieving upperclassmen by inducting them into their respective honor societies. At the same event, our teachers highlighted the seniors who were certified biliterate in English and Spanish and will therefore have the seal of biliteracy on their diplomas.
Thank you very much. And that is an incredible achievement for those students. Okay, moving on to section 7. This is our first opportunity for public comment. The purpose for this public comment section is to discuss items listed on the agenda. Additional, more general comments may be made later in the meeting. The public is reminded that attempts to resolve all concerns and complaints should first go through appropriate staff members and administrators. The intent of public comment is to give the community the opportunity to provide feedback to the board. We will be actively listening and taking notes so that we can take all that is being said into consideration. If appropriate, clarifying comments may be made at the end of the public comment section. For more detailed responses to concerns, communication may go out later in the week by the appropriate staff members or administrators, or be discussed by the board during future committee meetings. Members of the public are welcome to speak and expected to do so with the utmost sensitivity to everyone in attendance. In fairness to all who wish to speak, there is a strict 3-minute time limit that Ms. Coleman is getting her timer ready for. We will let you know when there's about 30 seconds left. Please remember to state your name and address for the record.
Can you hear me? Is it on? Okay. My name is Kevin Jones. I'm a 17-year-old student here at Collingswood High School, the president of the Black Student Union and the Political Action Committee chair for the NAACP Camden County East Youth Council. For those of you who don't know what the NAACP is, it stands for the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People. Greetings to the members of school board and superintendent. To the superintendent and school board president, I pose these questions. Are you going to communicate to the public the current amount and future for DEI initiatives with Collingswood High School? The specific amount for this year and next year should be communicated to the public. It should be also be known that will be communicated to the public and when the funding will go into effect. Who are the students representatives on the school board DEI committee? How does one get nominated? When will the members of the school board and the superintendent meet with students at Collingswood High School? When will we be able to hear our voices heard at a scheduled meeting to discuss our concerns? The point of this statement tonight is students are most impacted. Our input should be valued the most. On behalf of the Black Student Union and NAACP, I would like to say, when you guys talked about student organizations, the NAACP is an out-of-school organization. We are the youth council. This is our president, our membership chair, and our vice president. I'm sorry. I am the political action committee chair. Recently, you guys, saw the article and stuff. It's very heartbreaking. As a black student at Collingswood, things are I'm kind of immune to it. It shouldn't be that way. It's very hard, walking around school, fearing for my safety, never know what could happen. This is the second time, the same thing has happened again. So when is the school board, the president, the superintendent, is going to step in to help, to move us forward, to have all students? When does the diversity comes in? When does black students have the representation? As a black male going to Collingswood High School, it's very hard. Dealing with stress, my safety, no diversity. So I want each of you guys, before you leave here tonight, figure a way for you guys to improve, to help us, to move us forward, to do everything you can. Just imagine if you were a black male or a black student going to Collingswood, how you guys would feel. It hurts. So as I close my remarks, can you guys please help us move forward? Thank you.
You can all talk individually. So Kevin already spoke, but if one of you wanted to speak, you can. Oh, do you want to give us the questions? Is that? No, the questions I have. So we will find a time to meet with you and get back to you. We're not doing the back and forth right now, but thank you. And if you could email us the questions, that would be even better. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. I'm Brenda Borkowski. I live on Harvard Avenue here in Collingswood. I'd like to thank the students who spoke before me and invite them to come to every Board of Education meeting, please. That was great. Okay, so I'm here to speak to the issue of racism that was addressed in this meeting. On April 9th, the NJ Penn News outlet broke the story of students at this high school organizing a white student union. This news drove an icy fear straight through my heart, as I am sure that it did through the hearts of many parents of black children in this school district. A white student union is the stuff of my actual nightmares. I'm absolutely appalled, I'm disgusted, and since the story broke, I've felt a mixture of rage, disbelief, and most often, heartbreak. First, I'm heartbroken for the perpetrators. The article reported that they first formed the group as an ironic response to the school's black student union. Obviously, these white students have not been educated on the importance of black student unions and why black student unions exist. BSUs exist to comfort and nourish the black identity and give black students an opportunity to gather and celebrate black culture in a society that does not always comfort, nourish, and celebrate blackness. Someone failed to educate these students on the ways in which this country has oppressed black people for centuries and the very reason that BSUs are necessary. Forming a group with the name White Student Union isn't ironic, it's hateful. And the adults around these white children have failed to educate them on racism. Most of all, I'm heartbroken for the victims in this situation, who are the students of color in Collingswood High School. Put simply, they are in danger. The perpetrators used racial slurs and threatened violence. These acts are threats to mental and physical health and are not to be taken lightly. This is the part of racism that I naively thought we had left behind us, the part where racists say the racist words out loud. I thought we had driven racists into the shadows, but no. They are out loud and in the open, possibly even immortalizing the White Student Union in the Collingswood High School yearbook. Yearbooks are places for jokes, and a White Student Union is not a joke. It is a racist attack. Our students of color are being actively traumatized, and Collingswood High School is unsafe. I am asking the Board of Education to apply pressure to the school system to address this situation. I think I'm running out of time, so I'm skipping ahead. Furthermore, I urge the board to seek out any presence in the system of the sentiment that all lives matter, because all lives cannot matter until Black lives matter. To suggest otherwise is like saying to a firefighter who is actively fighting a house fire, wait, all houses matter. Because no, they don't. At that moment in time, the burning house is the one that matters. And when students in this district think that a white student union is ironic or a joke, then the school system is on fire. As James Baldwin wrote, not everything that is faced can be changed, but nothing can be changed until it is faced. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Megan DeSmet. I live at 220 Woodlawn Terrace, and my son George is a first grader at Tatum. And I also want to talk about the recent racist acts that have been happening at the high school, but of course they've been ongoing. I do really appreciate the amount of time and candor that this group spent talking about this, but it is not enough. I personally don't have the grace, and I don't think the black and brown students, any of us in this town, should have the grace to just excuse these as mistakes. Our black and brown students don't have the luxury. Our high school is not a safe place for them, and we need to do more. The fact that a white supremacist hate group formed at our high school, and a handful of students were maybe officially sanctioned and punished as being officially participating in it, but we all know, we all were in high school. Those kinds of secrets are never secrets. Other people knew, and I'm not just talking about the students, I'm talking about the adults in the building and outside of the building. These kinds of things can't be secret. We need to do more. Our school is not safe for black and brown students. And I know that it's not going to be a quick and simple fix. But what I'm hearing, again, I have a first grader, but what I'm hearing from my friends who have kids in the high school, or what they're hearing from their friends, this is what high school kids are telling their parents. The perception in the high school from everybody I know who has students in the high school is that they got a slap on the wrist, they're back at school, they're participating in activities, they're receiving awards, They're making racist jokes again at school, and it is not a safe environment for our black and brown students, and we all, and I want to be part of the solution, but we need every single person in this room, in this town, in all of our school buildings, and in our community to do more. Thank you.
Wayne Rossi, 114 East Palmer Ave. I've come to this board every single meeting for more than a year now, calling for racial justice, and I am absolutely heartbroken to see in the news racial tension at the high school, literally to see my spouse on the news talking about this incident at the high school. I know that kids do not feel safe. I believe that we are failing almost half of our high school students of color. I feel we're also failing the white kids if this is going on. I feel like there remains, and this kind of thing happens when there is a culture of impunity around it. If kids feel like they can say slurs, if kids feel like they can start a white student union, and these are kids who are celebrated, that is a culture of impunity, and that is a problem that needs to be rooted out. We need everyone on this. We need administrators, teachers, students, and parents in on this, and it needs to change now and yesterday. No one should have a pass, and no one should be allowed to opt out of this. We need to create a community that is going to embrace all of our students and accept diversity. I'm glad to hear us talking about restorative justice. I think that act of bringing students into a community and really trying to do the hard work of repairing the harms that are done has to be something that we do in this school. I also think that students of color need people who, in the staff, who look like them and who they can trust. I think we really need to rethink everything. Every teacher needs to be, an administrator needs to be a model of active anti-racism, and all of them should be able to speak openly about race. And one of the ways of helping with that is things like affinity groups to help hold people responsible. We need to make sure that we're acknowledging the harms of racism, listening to students of color, interrogating bias, and changing how we approach discipline. We need to be honest about what Collingswood is, that severe racial inequalities exist in this community and our state, and we have de facto residential segregation, which impacts our schools. We need to celebrate the good, but also acknowledge that there's a lot of work to be done. I do think that the students who were part of the White Student Union group need to be held accountable to a higher level, and there needs to be reparative work done if we're talking about restorative justice. We need to be honest about racism being systemic. We do not just blame a few students on this. We need everyone to fix it. There's currently an overwhelmingly white staff, and I am not interested in them feeling white guilt. I want them to act as anti-racists and do the hard work of building a culture where every student feels respected and appreciated. I think your policies have meant well, and they
Mr. Rossi, we're
clearly haven't
time's
gone
up. Thank
far
you.
enough. So thank you.
Hi, Alyssa Hockman. I'm at 2 Lakeshore Drive. I have a kindergartner, Maya, in our school system. I wanted to say, just to start out, that she was actually taught the N-word this year by a white classmate of hers. So I wholeheartedly agree that this is a district-wide and a systemic issue that needs to be grappled with, and everyone needs to own that as the reality. I appreciate the emphasis of supporting those who were harmed by racist experiences at the high school. And part of supporting those who experienced harm is seeing meaningful accountability and change. I understand that the people who were in the white student group, working with them, we might want to emphasize learning from their actions, but we also need to be looking at who is handling said learning. Adults in the school system who are unwilling to do meaningful work around racial justice and equity should not be working with our children. Adults who supported the White Student Union or knew about it and did nothing should not be teaching our children. I chose to live in Collingswood specifically because it's a vibrant and diverse community. More and more parents are waking up and recognizing that dismantling racism in our schools is a non-negotiable and are going to be expecting that of our staff. I recognize that adults, and particularly white adults, have a lot of learning to do, and those who are open to that learning are not necessarily the issue and can be an excellent model to our young people about change and growth. I personally am a psychologist, and in my field, you are not allowed to practice if you willingly hold a bias towards a group of people that you're not working on because of the harm that you can cause the people you serve. School staff have as much, if not more, access to and impact on our children. You talked about staffing and budget issues. Are we looking at coaching out staff who are not willing or capable to serve our diverse children and not cause harm to them? Are we prioritizing that staff we hire going forward are genuinely invested in this work? That is an essential part of long-term change in the systemic issues we are facing. Thank you.
Leah Foreman, 501 South Vineyard Boulevard. I want to echo Brenda and thank the Black students for coming to speak tonight. I see you and we're listening. Please come to every board meeting. With that, I'll get started. Last year, after the student walkouts, I sat down with Dr. McDowell at a parent advisory council meeting. We spoke extensively about what had happened at the high school, and he had a definitive plan for next steps, which involved a commitment to DEI and adult learning. He acknowledged that this plan, as he did tonight, was not a quick fix and would take time, because racial justice is a marathon, not a sprint. I asked Dr. McDowell at that meeting, what are you going to do to prevent the white people in the building from causing more harm to Black and brown students while you implement your plan and begin DEI training? Here we are a year later, and things not only remain unchanged, but they're worse. The Black and brown students do not feel safe in the building, and the only people to blame are the white people who are actively digging their heels in and not participating in the work of unlearning racism. I hear white people saying, well, I'm not racist, I love everyone, I'm colorblind. And I'm here to tell you that ideology is both flawed and dangerous. It's not enough to say, I am not racist. You must also understand that the systems were built to serve us and only us. If you are not actively participating in changing them, you are causing harm. The product of the environment we created at the high school is the white student union. It's the students who are actively using the N-word to bully their Black and brown peers. It's the teachers and staff who have modeled that behavior for them by disparaging Black and brown students daily in their classrooms without repercussions. This is what happens when you are in a position of power and let racism go unchecked, and when white people get to prioritize their comfort over the lives of Black and brown students. At the January board meeting, I watched openly bigoted staff and community members stand up and disparage Dr. McDowell, the one person who is actively trying to solve our biggest systemic issues through his leadership. At that meeting, I heard the head of the teachers union openly thank, and I quote, gave their full union support to an openly bigoted board member. I've heard that the staff at the high school deliberately misgender students. I've heard that students who face suspension for creating the white student union are being given awards and allowed to fully participate in the community again. That is not accountability. They cannot be allowed back into the community without actually learning about the harm they cause their peers and then making amends. It's abundantly clear by the behavior of the union leadership, staff are being shielded from accountability. That stops today. If you cannot do the bare minimum and treat students like human beings, you do not have a place here. I don't want the district to provide cover to bigots anymore. It's time, the time for adult accountability is over, and now it's time for action. I'm no longer willing to sit by and allow this to continue. I'm asking for sweeping accountability today.
Thank you, Ms. Foreman.
Some community members really bring the heat. Dr. Mark Brasoff, Garfield parent. Thank you, Garfield. Professor of education. Love this place. Love this community. I'm not going to go into all the reasons why we should do the change because I think people have really done that tonight already. I just want to sort of pull a tease out Dr. McDowell's comment about it needs to manifest. The change needs to manifest from the schools. I really truly believe that teachers and faculty are the stewards of the school. Administrators go, board members go, but the truly tenure and faculty and teachers, they stick around. So it's really important that those people, those community members engage in the change and really want to do the work. So I have some questions for teacher leadership and of course the board and the administration. I've also passed out some of those questions, and there's two sets of standards in there that might be a support. The first one is cultural responsive and sustaining educator competencies. So that's the second one, in which the Pennsylvania Department of Education has now adopted, in which all teacher education programs, teacher induction programs, principal leadership programs, they have to do and to learn how to be responsive to their students. This is now required in Pennsylvania. The first set of standards is combating anti-black racism standards. They are standards that are developed by a bunch of experts at Arcadia University, and in terms of like what can a curriculum look like when it's responding to anti-racism. Okay, here's my questions to teacher leadership. What efforts have there been to include more non-Eurocentric knowledge and values in the curriculum across most subjects? If there have been efforts, can all those outcomes be shared out with the community in a singular document for evaluation and assessment? Has there been ongoing professional learning experiences and dialogue about race and inclusion in the classroom and in the curriculum? What has been those discrete topics, if so? Where have teachers been asked to continuously reflect on systemic oppression, can they define it, and the ways in which their own personal experiences relate and diverge from others? How is that facilitated, and when does it happen? What history about the African American civil rights movement post the assassination of Martin Luther King Jr. do students study? What authors are taught in the core of the school's curriculum, and how many of those are non-Eurocentric? What knowledge do teachers have about cultures other than themselves? Can teachers explain how and why a white student union emerged and the history of how such belief and behaviors manifested and are maintained today? In other words, do they understand why the bad apples metaphor represents flawed analysis of the problem? Can they explain why all lives matter is an inappropriate response to Black Lives Matter? Do teachers know what microaggressions are? Do teachers know the difference between having a deficit perspective versus asset-based perspective of students in their communities? Have students learned how to disrupt racially charged comments and behaviors of students and their colleagues? Do they know how to break white silence when racism emerges? Has the teacher union released a statement regarding the most recently charged incident, previous ones? If so, can they be reshared? Where do they stand on the development of a white student union? Where can youth and adults have prolonged conversations about the school, their aims, and their ideas for school change? How have their ideas been translated into action? If
Thank
so,
you, Dr. Brassoff. I just cut you off. Thank you.
got it.
Hi, I'm Rebecca Finkel, 916 Park. I am not a parent of a high schooler. I'm a parent of a second grader at Zane North Elementary. And I've already seen enough to know that we have to act. There are black and brown children in this town who I have known since they were in preschool. When this group of students entered elementary school in Collingswood, these kids, who I knew to be bold and happy, started to be exposed to racism. One parent of a girl I knew to be extremely confident told me that her daughter had started telling her that she wished she had light skin so that she could fit in. She felt left out, being one of so few kids of color in her class. Another child I knew was teased multiple times for her natural hair, and these were just the incidents that I heard about. Last Thursday evening at Zane North, while the students watched a movie in the gym, the PTA hosted breakout groups for parents to discuss the racism that Zane kids are experiencing and how we as parents can begin to address it, not just as an emergency response, but proactively. The goal of this excellent initiative is for students to become upstanders, to stand up to racism when they see it. We can't prevent kids from encountering racist influences, but we can teach our kids and ourselves to call it out and to become a barrier against white supremacist culture thriving in our schools. I've been thinking a lot about the preschool where I met these kids. The majority of early education providers there and in this country are women of color. I bring this up tonight to highlight that the environment that they provided for their students was safe and enriching, something that this district needs to value and emulate. We need to give these teachers and their skills the recognition, the prioritization, and very importantly, the compensation they deserve. I know that Dr. McDowell is already working on this, but we as a community need to create an environment that not only attracts and retains, but values teachers of color. This will require all of us to examine our personal biases, to talk to our families, and to demand change at our schools by calling out the racism that has been hurting our kids for far too long. Thank you.
Hi, Holly Capasso Harris, 6 Garfield Avenue. I have 2 kids at the high school. I wanted to thank Dr. McDowell and this board because I've been watching you over the years provide thoughtful, inclusive, progressive policies and that you've been championing. And I've seen the backlash. I know it is much needed and it's not enough. I've lived here for 20 years and my kids have gone through the school system. I know that although the incidents of racism that have occurred recently have been the most shocking, there is racism and bias that's not new here. We heard from many students last year that they don't feel welcome in the school. They're treated differently in many ways. We are seeing that play out now when there have been these shocking incidents of racism and they're not been taken seriously. From where I sit, it seems that the feelings of the white perpetrators are being prioritized over the safety and mental health of the black students at the school. It seems to me that things are back to business as usual for these white students and that they are actually being celebrated and held up as leaders of the school. These students are still competing in sports, they're participating in extracurricular activities, they're still receiving awards. It's unacceptable. I'm here to ask for accountability and education. I want both students and staff held accountable for their actions. We've heard a lot about culture and climate these past few years, and it is obvious that a big change is needed. I'm asking you to keep pushing for that change. Please invest in DEI education, and please hold accountable the staff who are not on board with working together to create a school district that works for all of our kids. Every kid in this district is my kid, and right now we're failing them and we need to do better.
Hi, my name is Lori Burton. I live at 315 Lees Lane. I'm not a parent of a high schooler, an educator, or a DEI expert, and I won't be nearly as eloquent as the brave students who spoke here this evening. But on this topic, my children's elementary school, thank you. I'm not nearly as tall as the rest of you. Thank you. But on this topic, my children's elementary school community is already tackling these incredibly heavy topics as we deal with incidents of racism rearing its ugly head in even our youngest classrooms. Based on the heartbreaking accounts from students of color, it's clear that the culture at the high school is a crisis. The environment is not safe for black and brown students, and we cannot accept this status quo. How can it be that there are students who feel they have no trusted adult to turn to, that there's no hope for change? We need to come together as a community to meet this challenge from every angle, from community and parent engagement, conversations at home, staff training, restorative justice, curriculum, and student support. The list is not short, and the effort will not be small. These issues have been going on for years, and we need the entire school community to be actively focused on anti-racism if we want to make meaningful progress. As Dr. McDowell said, none of us are immune to structural and systemic racism, and I feel that this important work will not be accomplished by those who ignore, tolerate, or excuse harmful racist behavior, who aren't willing to accept that there is a problem and name it, who deflect responsibility without looking inward, and who get discouraged by the enormity of the work ahead and throw their hands up. I'm encouraged to hear about the meaningful work that's already underway, and I care deeply about doing my part. I have great respect for the board and administration, and I strongly urge you to continue to listen to students when they say that they don't feel safe or supported. Believe them when they describe racist harassment that occurs on a daily basis and largely without consequence. Then demand accountability and take bold action to remove the obstacles that stand in our way of creating a safe environment for all kids. Thank you.
My name is Stuart Campbell, class of 98, 23 Washington. I really want to thank you kids for coming out. This issue was a big problem in the 90s, and I wish that somebody had stood up. I'm ashamed that I didn't. So I just wanted to say the prejudice has always been in this town. It's right bubbling under the surface. And although I've been confrontational with you guys at the referendum meetings, I really want to applaud you because you're the first school board to even acknowledge that it exists. I'm hoping that you guys are also addressing the pretty much terrorizing of the Latino students, the Asian students, the LGBT students, all of the at-risk kids, the girls who are being assaulted and nothing happens ever. This is like a comprehensive issue that I know it's going to be slow, but it's got to be addressed. And I'm not well spoken, so I noticed, I don't know much about the budgeting, but I noticed that on page 5 and 13, on line 29, 180, it says up to 17 families are going to be evicted from Parkview. And I think that Parkview is the only assisted low-income housing in town other than Collingswood Arms, which is rehabilitation elderly. It seems to me, and I might be wrong, that it unfairly affects the low-income families and the working poor in town. It seems like a loss of revenue ultimately, and I think it would make more sense to invest less in some programs and invest more in affordable housing across the whole town and add revenue that way and actually address the DEI issues in town. The referendum integrates the school, but the town stays segregated. There's only one side of town that has low-income housing, and it's scientifically proven when you have a mixed neighborhood, people's prejudice are lowered and it goes away. And I don't know if this is an issue that, I don't know why it was listed in the budget, if you guys are in control of that funding, if the town is, and I was wondering if like next time you guys could address like how that affects the budget, who's in charge of that, and what we can do to actually integrate the town. You guys are doing, it seems like a great plan in the school, but then this hate group, you can't address the parents who are teaching this thing to their children. These families have been here since the 70s, 80s, 90s. It's always the same thing. So we're going to, as a community, we're going to have to like change fundamentally. Thanks.
Oh, this is low. I'm Alexandra Guido, 311 Lakeview Drive. My husband and I have 2 children in the Collingswood school system. We have a kindergarten student, and we have a rising high school freshman. I preface my comments by saying that my family has had experience with some Collingswood staff members who are actively committed toward creating an inclusive and anti-racist public school system, and yet systematic racism persists. I am proud to see our high school students here, and I want them to see that their community hears them and their community supports them. I'm shocked the Teachers Union has not put out a statement in support of our students of color and a statement that condemns the White Student Union. Last year, following the high school walkouts done by the students of color, the community begged you to act. The students told us of their experienced microaggressions and other acts of racism by staff members who are responsible for their care, safety, and education. They played recordings and relayed conversations and incidents instigated by staff who were, and some still are, working within these buildings. These children bravely stood up to tell their Collingswood family that they were not safe. It was a sad and a brutal reckoning for our community to understand that we had failed to cultivate a safe environment for our children of color. And where are we now? A year later, a white student union. Ironic or not, we have left our children in an environment overseen by some staff members who complain on the record about the required DEI training. We've left our students in an environment where some staff widely and inappropriately complain to their students that the leader of our district is somehow untrustworthy and means to harm them. We have left our children in an environment that we will no longer accept. Make no mistake, whoever they are, these staff do not belong in a place of authority or responsibility for our children. Our problem is clearly systematic, but it cannot and will not be undone as long as the district continues to protect bad actors. There will be time for reconciliation, but the time now is for accountability and action. We insist on a plan that determines where and when our children of color are not in safe spaces, and specific actions to rectify that. There is a reckoning that undeniably must happen, and it is the district's responsibility to do so. You must act. These are our schools and our community and our children. and we will accept nothing less than their safety.
Hi, Kevin Walker, 401 West Franklin Avenue. I actually have a question about the budget presentation. I know it's been a very challenging year for you. I know there's been a substantial shortfall in state aid, and as a result, there's this huge gap in the budget. As I understand it, there's going to be a tax increase of approximately $135 per assessed average value. And then I assume there's going to be reductions in staff. Is that right? How substantial are those reductions going to be? I know you don't want to compromise instruction. I know you don't want to compromise rigor, but how many staff positions are we talking about? What are the subject matter that is being taught? And what's the process that is being used to determine where those cuts are going to be made? In other words, how many people are we looking at? And in what areas, and how are those cuts being made? Is it going through the board? Is the board making that ultimate decision within the next week? If we could just have a general sense, I'd appreciate it.
We're not going to respond right now. We may respond at the end, but we don't do a back and forth.
It's a budget presentation, though. At what point can we ask questions about the presentation? Do I have to wait till the end to ask the same question?
So let me be.
I'm just talking about general process. I don't want
I
to
understand.
name names or anything.
I understand, but in terms of the privacy and the protection of personnel issues, we will not deliberate that publicly. What I can share with you is process, and so in terms of process, the deliberative process has been taking place since October. We will be engaging with our association leaders this week in partnership with our school and building leaders, which has been ongoing. And because it affects people, the impact of said people will not be known by next week. And so it was brought up in our committee of the whole. The impact we will hope to be able to encapsulate during the May board meeting with all of the details and programs that are affected.
Okay, thank you very much.
Zakia Devine, 1102 Stokes and Benjamin, number 3. So I really just wanted to make a few comments. So I'm the Zane North PTA president, also having to bring awareness to our community about racism from our youngest to our oldest students. And so as I walk in through the world in my skin, my initial reaction to what I'm hearing is silence. To be silent is to be complicit. And there's a lot of silence. And so I am struggling on behalf of these students, my children, and even myself to wrap my head around, what are we doing? Is this performative, or are we going to act? I would offer, right, having to listen to rooms filled of parents, they're asking me, where are these resources coming from? If not just my own lived experiences and others. Where are we, what are we gonna do? What is the action going to look like? To ask PTAs to stand in this space is underwhelming at best. It is on the backs of people who are hoping to do the best for their children and still not coming up fully so that when they get to high school, they show up as upstanders and to get rid of this issue. Right, I sit in a lifetime of knowing the day I was called the N-word. And I'm wondering, when is my child coming through the door with that experience? So I can expect it. That is what I understand today. So I'm really asking for action because the silence is deafening and enabling. So please, help us show up. If you need folks to stand in the halls and call out what this is, let me know where to sign up. Leverage the community that I hear today to start to help. Because to continue to hope it gets better is coming up short. I feel like my theme when I come to this mic is shame on us, but I have to repeat it. Shame on us, because it's only a matter of the next grade. I'm gonna hope by this time this one comes in, I won't be wondering what grade will he be in when he's called the N-word. Thank you.
Hi. My name is Caitlin Seeley. I am a former resident of Collingswood. I grew up in the Collingswood school system. I graduated from Collingswood in 2003. I am now currently the administrative assistant to the middle school principal, Dr. Jack McMullen, and I am a CEA member. I am here this evening to represent a small contingent of the administrative assistants in our district. And I say administrative assistant purposely, as our duties have shifted away from secretarial duties to those that are no longer defined in our contract description. If I only did the things that were listed in my brief job description, very little would get accomplished. Gone are the days when your main office lady was somebody's mom or grandmom who wanted to work while her kids were at school or wanted to pad her retirement for a little bit. Our position is now one of the most demanding in the district. We are the first line of response. We are the first to speak to a parent, guardian, or student, or anyone who needs to get in touch with the school building. We handle the safety of both students and staff. We handle accounting. We act as liaison to nursing, the athletic department, technology, and so on. I love my job. I love the kids. I love the admins. I love the teachers. I love my coworkers. What I don't love is the perceived lack of respect or acknowledgement for what we do and continue to do. There needs to be greater investment in your lowest level. We are not included in any continuing education or training. We offered to go to the training, and we were told no. We are rarely compensated for any duties that are done outside of our contracted hours, which when broken down comes to barely above what a sub gets per day. At the current pace, administrative assistants in the district will make under minimum wage. In my own case, my contracted hours are 7:30 to 3:30. On most days, I arrive no later than 7:10 in order to organize for the day, do sub coverage, and make changes that need to happen in the schedule. The students enter the building at 7:50. Could you imagine if I arrived at 7:30 and attempted to complete sub coverage for multiple teachers while attending to phone calls, daily morning activities in less than 20 minutes? My question is similar to the one that's been asked before. How do you intend to retain staff for this position? How are you going to make this a desirable position again? I enjoy being at work. I enjoy being busy. I enjoy the different aspects, but I also need to be able to help support my family. We're aware of the budget.
Thank you, Mrs. Seeley.
Gretchen Kalecki, 920 Grand Avenue. I have a 8th grader and a senior and a graduate. Speaking to some of the budget concerns, I did notice that Ms. Coleman's salary and Dr. McDowell's salary were in the paperwork that we received. They're substantial compared to some of the other people's salaries. I also Googled, can't find much. I mean, we know that Dr. McDowell was in the 193 and now is going to 200,000. Ms. Coleman was 161 in 2020 and is now going to 192 now in 2024. So that's a $30,000 increase in 4 years, which is, I would think, jaw-dropping in education. While we are hearing that other staff are barely going to be making minimum wage. Let me tell you, those folks are who see your kids when, when they're sick, when they forgot stuff, when they don't feel good, when they're scared. That's who they go to. But if you don't want to train them and they're willing to be trained, what are we doing? Seriously. Again, in some sports franchises, your high players, they sometimes take a lower salary that year to make things work so you can trust the process, go forward. I don't know if that's on the table. I don't really understand all the information about the salaries. I don't know if those other stipends are included in that large amount or if they are in addition to the large amount of the base salary. I don't know. Can you speak to that? Is your base salary your entire salary, or are
We're
there
not going to
stipends?
speak back to you right now. You
Okay.
can
So
make your
how
comment.
do we ever find that out? Okay, so you won't even tell us that. Okay. I'm just wondering, since the salary is close to $17,000 a year, if you could take a little less for those people.
So I just
Are
need
you-
to. I'm going to know.
Are
Different
you on a
comment.
different topic?
I'm on a different comment. Yeah, that needs to be addressed. So talking about administrative salaries is a red herring. What we heard from our superintendent today is that we have a structural deficit and that we need to engage the state. Us fighting each other over administrative salaries is not a smart move. Secondly, let's say we took $30,000 away from this man. What is that really going to buy you? All right? It's not an appropriate comment. Thank you.
Seeing that no one else is coming up to the microphone, thank you for everyone who took the time to speak to us today. Just to reiterate, because I think there was some confusion, public comment is just that, it's time for comment. We don't engage in a back and forth. If you have a question that you would like to be answered, as we've mentioned before, reaching out to us through email would be the best way to get that specific response. Okay, oh, Marianne, are you, okay.
Sorry, I don't have prepared comments. I really just wanted to make a statement in support of the students who are just leaving now, just to let them know that I, as a parent of black children, stand with them. And I know our group, Embracing Race, the Conversation, stands with them, along with many other people in the community. So I just wanted to get that on the record. So, thank you. So I'm Adrienne Earl. I'm a resident. My kids go to Sharp, and I work at the middle school. And I didn't prepare because I didn't see. Anyway, I didn't know everything that was going to be on the agenda. So when I'm not prepared, I probably won't do a good job. But I guess I wanted to speak to you all as board members, are my neighbors. So you and the community out there regarding the recent incidents at the high school, which as staff members, like, we're actually not privy to much because of students' personal information, just so that we're clear on that, but just more from a community level, just to advocate to my neighbors here for us to really speak to each other and not just the people who agree with you, which I think it's very easy for us to all do that, like our people who we're friends with, and we kind of have common ideals, but I do think that this actually also, having grown up here, this is a larger issue in our community because I think we have more diversity than a lot of our neighboring towns. And then especially when the three towns come together, that brings more diversity, which can bring, you know, a need for more understanding of each other. And I'm rambling, but just if we all as neighbors can try to make an effort to really talk to each other, I think that will help us to do better for our kids as well. You know, I'm part of the equity committee at the secondary level. That was a really great experience from the early October when we met, and then being in here with a huge group of staff members from all over the district for the second phase. And I'm going to run out of time. But as staff members, I agree it's so important for us to be a major part of that, but just also as like parents and community members, it's so important for us to engage because our students are hearing a lot at home, and that's the first place where they're getting their ideals and their values from, and that's really challenging for a kid to think outside of what they're getting from their first early experiences at home, but not impossible, because I know my own parents did that, but just, okay, back to my point of us speaking directly to each other rather than just in our groups where we know we already agree with, and challenging ourselves to like listen to others who we know might not agree with us initially, so that we can better understand each other, I think would help with not just our schools and our students here, but our community, and to like move forward and keep that going in the future. Someone's timing me, right? Like, I can't believe I haven't run out of time yet. Okay, I think I'm done.
Hi, my name's Morgan Lair. I live on 4019 Woodlawn Avenue. I have two twins they're 7 years old at second grade at Tatum. I just wanted to remind some of our members that we used to have an equity committee in Collingswood. Ms. Caden, you were a big part of that. We met at our own time. It was made of teachers, community members, board members, and we gave up our own time, and we made a lot of really great improvements, I think, and we were really starting to pick up steam. The pandemic hit, and that definitely slowed things down, but even despite that, the teachers continued to meet. We had talked of doing a curriculum rehaul, looking at our read-alouds. What read-alouds are we putting in front of our young students? How do we diversify them? We talked about the problems that we are talking about now, bringing services to all instead of just only to one classroom. And we still continue to meet through the pandemic, and then in 2021, when our new administrator took over, for some reason, the equity committee was dismantled. And I agree with everything you are saying. This is slow, important work, but I am saddened to think of what could have, or how far along we could be, had that equity committee not been dismantled at that time. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Lucille DeYoung, and I live at 550 Grand Avenue in Collingswood. Sorry about that. I don't have a prepared statement. I'm actually asking a question that somebody else had recently asked me. Since the evictions are actually so much part of the budget, why are we considering renting space from them for the pre-K in a place where they're kicking kids out? And that's it. Thanks.
Okay, thank you everyone for taking the time to make your voices heard. We're going to move on to Section 8, which is our annual appointments and approvals. Ms. Coleman, you are up.
All right, I'll be as quick as possible. I did not take classes in speed reading, but here we go. 8.01 is the annual approval of our architect of record, Garrison Architects. 8.02 is the listing of our appointments of our auditor, our school doctor, our medical examiner, and our board attorney. 8.03, excuse me, is just approving our broker of record for health insurance for participation in the school's health insurance fund. 8.04 is approving a broker of record for all other lines of insurance that we're mandated to have. 8.05 is a listing of our official banks. 8.06 is a listing of our official newspapers. 8.07 is a listing of the signature authorizations for all the bank accounts. And yes, we have to do this stuff every single year, people, so I apologize. 8.08 is approving me as the qualified purchasing agent on behalf of the district. And that sets the bid amount at $40,000. 8.09 is authorizing me to make purchases of CDs and banknotes for investment purposes as if we have the cash. 8.10 is just authorizing myself to transfer wires. 8.11 is just approving me to pay invoices in between board meetings, should that happen, and it's usually with the utilities like Comcast and PSE&G, and then I bring it to the board at the next board meeting. 8.12 is establishing our petty cash fund, and then those funds are redeposited into the bank account at the end of each school year. 8.13 is establishing me as the district's custodian of records and my assistant Steve as the alternate custodian of records. And if you're wondering what that is, we handle all the OPA requests. 8.14 is approving John Longo, our new Director of Supervisor of Buildings and Grounds, as the district's asbestos management officer, safety and health designee, integrated pest management coordinator, chemical hygiene officer, and asbestos hazardous emergency response coordinator. Congratulations, John. 8.15 is approving myself and John Longo and Steve Burns as the Right to Know and POSHA officers on behalf of the district. 8.16 is approving me as the Public Agency Compliance Officer. 8.17 is approving Dr. Karen Principato as the Compliance Action Officer for Affirmative Action. 8.18 is approving Kim Hallenbeck as the Compliance Action Officer for 504s. 8.19 is approving Omni Group as our third-party administrators for our staff's 403B tax shelter plan. 8.20 is approving Maria Tessing as our homeless liaison for the district. 8.21 is approving me as the issuing officer for the working papers in the school district. 8.22 is approving Windsor Yamamoto as the Title IX coordinator. 8.23, we're approving the school safety and security plan, and then that also includes our emergency operations plan, crisis prevention and response procedures, and our emergency management plan. 8.24 is approving Joe Gersick as our district school safety specialist. 8.25 is approving Dr. Whitehouse as our Americans with Disability Act officer. 8.26 is just authorizing, that we approve and collect and maintain student records in accordance with New Jersey law. 8.27 is a listing of all of our special ed program offerings for the 24-25 school year. 8.28 is approving the Twilight Alternative Program. 8.29 is approving the educator practice rubrics, the Charlotte Danielson framework as listed. 8.30 is approving our annual enrollment in the NJSIAA, that's the New Jersey State Interscholastic Athletic Association. 8.31 is our annual adoption of all our board policies and bylaws, and they're all on the website. 8.32 is setting our substitute pay rates as listed. 8.33 is approving rates for athletic staff, athletic event staff, for the 24-25 school year. And that is it.
Thank you. Motion to approve items 8.01 to 8.33.
So moved.
And a second.
Second.
Questions or comments from board members? Roll call, please.
Okay, Mr. Chu.
Yes.
Mr. Craig.
Yes.
Mrs. Maya.
Yes.
Mrs. Mikulski.
Yes.
Mrs. Seltzer.
Yes.
Mrs. Sheridan Celia.
Yes.
Mrs. Sherman.
Yes.
Mrs. Caden.
Yes. Section 9 is the superintendent's report. Dr. McDowell will present.
Section 9.01 is the district enrollment report. March of 2023, numbers were 2264. March of 2024 is 2254 with the report attached. 9.02, 3, and 4 are the school safety drill, suspension, and anti-bullying report. And just want to share just a few comments not already articulated. And so first and foremost, I would like to publicly congratulate Collingswood High School senior Zion Herring on receiving the Gates Scholarship. The Gates Scholarship is a highly selective. The Gates Scholarship is a highly selective scholarship awarded to exceptional student leaders with the intent of helping them realize their maximum potential by covering the full cost of the attendance of their undergraduate education. Out of over 53,000 applications, Zion was one of 750 scholarship recipients across the country. Scholarship recipients were selected by the following criteria: an outstanding academic record in high school in the top 10% of his or her graduating class, demonstrated leadership ability, and exceptional personal success skills. We'd like to thank all of the high school faculty and staff that supported Zion and his family along the way. I reached out to his family, and we are extremely proud of you, Zion. We'd also like to acknowledge last week we had a district-wide participation in the Autism Acceptance Walk. And so in honor of National Autism Acceptance Month, 620 Collingswood students K through 12, including our 18 to 21 program, celebrated neurodiversity, understanding, and inclusion on April 23rd in Knight Park. And so the music was played, students and staff, they came out representing their different communities, all to be able to celebrate. And we'd like to publicly acknowledge and thank Zane North teacher, Miss Kelly Curley, for collaborating with the Special Education Parent Advisory Group, CPAG. This serves as a community building opportunity to be able to spread messages of acceptance, inclusion, and connection. And so I just wanted to share Ms. Curley's statement. She says that our differences are not viewed as negative or deficit. They are what make us who we are. And my ultimate message for today is to show kindness by accepting and including everyone. And so for more information about autism advocacy and inclusion, please visit the Autistic Self-Advocacy Network website, and we will be posting that information later this week. We'd also just like to give a shout out to the tremendous efforts of all of our Collingswood students participating in Odyssey of the Mind. And so Odyssey of the Mind is an international program designed to help students at all learning levels grow as individuals and team members, and to be able to use natural creativity to become problem solvers. And so we are proud to share that several Collingswood teams are going to the World Championship in Ames, Iowa to Iowa State after a successful run at the state championship. There 9 Collingswood local teams competed. 3 were crowned New Jersey state champions. 2 received third place finishes, and 4 were invited to the World Finals on May 21st through the 24th. Congratulations to all of the students, coaches, and volunteers. We're extremely proud of you, and we're cheering you on. And that concludes the superintendent report.
Thank you, Dr. McDowell. Section 10 we already had, so we're skipping to Section 11, the Business Administrator Board Secretary Report. Ms. Coleman will present again.
All righty. And item 11.01 is a listing of the March monthly budget transfers. 11.02 is your board secretary's report, treasurer's report, all the financial statements. 11.03 is your student activity March report. 11.04 is your February and March food service financial statements. 11.05 is the listing of all the purchase orders that have been issued, for the month of April. And 11.06 is a listing of the warrants that will be paid pending approval tonight. They'll be paid tomorrow morning.
Thank you, Ms. Coleman. Moving on to Section 12, the Buildings, Grounds, and Finance Committee. Mr. Craig will present.
Thank you. The Finance, Buildings, and Grounds Committee reviews all financial statements, purchase orders, and warrants on a monthly basis. Committee also reviews and approves all contracts with outside service providers and oversees all maintenance and capital improvement projects district-wide. Seeking approval to the following items. 12.2 to 12.9 is the Board Secretary's report as it was presented. 12.10 is approval of the final budget that was presented today. 12.11 is approval of bond counsel services. 12.12 is insurance cover for our geese chasing dog. 12.13 is the NutriServe RFP response, which would be a 5-year agreement. We'd be entering back in with NutriServe. 12.14 to 12.18 are service contracts on an as-needed basis. 12.19, acceptance of the grant for the mental health services. 12.20, RFP for mental health services for secondary students. And with 12.19, that's approval of just over $60,000. That's year 1 of 4. The RFP for mental health services we currently partner with Virtua for our elementary students. This would give us providers for our older students after school. 1221 is acceptance of the AP African American Studies grant, which will provide training and resources for teachers so that we can offer the AP African American Studies in our high school. 1222 is Alliance Therapy Dog Services approval for any therapy dog services provided in schools. 1223, approval of a memorial bench remembering Lisa Marichon. 1224 to 1229 are various use of facility requests, and we are seeking approval from items 1202 to 1229.
All right, I will take over from Mrs. Caden. Can I have a motion?
So moved.
And a second? Any questions for Mr. Craig?
Yes, item 12.12, does that go beyond the goose chasing dog? The appointment of this entity?
Say that again?
The insurance, Beth Ann, that we said was just coverage that we had to get.
Is that just coverage for the goose chasing dog?
Yes, they are our consultant for all lines, but we pay Hardenberg directly for our little doggy. Yes.
Thank you for the clarification.
Any other questions or comments from board members?
Yes, I just wanted to make sure that I understand, because I don't, I'm just trying to wrap my head around this, because I know that this year we're doing things a little differently. Personnel issues are next week. Tonight is the budget vote. So I just want to make sure I understand what I'm voting for. So voting to adopt the final budget, which has been approved by the county and by the state, but with that final number, we still do not yet know, and that will be saved for a week from now, how this dollar amount will impact staffing and programming, because those decisions have not yet been made, correct? Thank you.
I'd like to make a comment on the budget, and specifically some of the discussion about the budget. I want to specifically speak about the continued attacks on the compensation that our superintendent is receiving. I'm going to speak on that because, as my experience as a person of color, I've had the feeling of having to justify my worth and belonging in spaces often. I feel like that is what has happened consistently with Dr. McDowell. Prior to Dr. McDowell's current contract being public, somehow those negotiated contract terms were leaked publicly online as a way to discuss whether or not his salary was appropriate. These are actions taken specifically that I believe are taken specifically because our superintendent is black. And yet, even today, we're being asked whether or not our superintendent should be paid his wages for the work he's doing or not. When we look at, beyond that point, the superintendent's contract has to be approved by the county superintendent. So what we're saying is that we have a contract here that is approved by outside entities, and somehow it's inappropriate. A contract where the raise that he received was in line with county average. But let's look at the specific terms of that contract. So for next year, Dr. McDowell's salary is $207,000. That's all inclusive. I was able to find two other contracts online, Haddonfield's and Haddon Townships. For Haddonfield, next year, the superintendent there's base salary is $210,000. He also receives a $5,000 increment because he's a superintendent of a district that has a high school. So that's $215,000. Dr. McDowell's salary is all inclusive. which means any increment is included in his current salary. Understand that there's also an increment for being the superintendent of a second school district, which Dr. McDowell is. That increment is $15,000. That increment is not part of the contract because Dr. McDowell's salary is all-inclusive, $207,000 for next year. In Haddon Township, let me finish with Haddonfield. The superintendent of Haddonfield has an opportunity to earn a 15% bonus per year. That's equivalent of next year $31,000 additionally. When we talk about Haddon Township, the superintendent next year, his base salary is $205,000 with a $5,000 high school increment, making it $210,000. So both of those salaries, base plus increments, are more than our current superintendent are making. Wait, let's take that another level, which is to understand that our current superintendent is superintendent of 2 school districts, which means that Oakland pays for 12% of his salary, which means that to Collingswood, his salary, what we owe for his salary is $182,000. So when we go out and say that our superintendent's salary is what's hurting our budget, we're paying less for our superintendent, much less for our superintendent, because the fact that he is the superintendent for 2 districts. We're paying much less for him than other surrounding districts are for their superintendents. I feel compelled to speak because for years now, I've had to sit and listen to folks without hard numbers or evidence question the worth of our superintendent. And I can't help but think that that has something to do with race, from my own experience as a person of color growing up in this country. When the budget issues that we face right now are real. We need to figure out how to make sure that we continue to pay our teachers what they're worth and we are able to meet the needs of our students. We need to do so with a firm belief that everyone here is working together to address these needs. And continued disingenuous attacks on school personnel will not help. It will not help. We have to face this issue together. You know, one of the things that we also hear oftentimes is administrative costs, administrative costs. Administrative costs are huge in our district. We saw in the pie chart, 9%. That's the administrative cost for our district. How does that rank? All of this information is public, by the way. How does that rank? That means that our per pupil administrative cost is less than Haddonfield, is less than Audubon, is less than Haddon Heights, is less than Pine Hill Borough, is less than Haddon Township, less than Clementon Borough, is less than Sterling High School District. Per district, per student cost, administrative cost is less than all of those districts. And yet we continue to hear this idea that money has been mismanaged or that we have a bloated administration. We will not be able to address these issues by ignoring the real structural issues of our budget. We have to go into this with clear eyes, with an eye towards truth, or else we're just going to run in circles, eating our own tail, and never actually be able to address any of these issues. Long monologue. I felt compelled to say that. That's my piece on the budget.
Thank you, Roger. Any other questions or comments from board members before we vote? Roll call, please.
Mr. Chu?
Yes.
Mr. Craig?
Yes.
Mrs. Maya?
Yes, except for 1210, I'm going to abstain.
Mrs. Mikulski?
Yes, except for item 12.10 where I abstain.
Mrs. Seltzer?
Yes.
Mrs. Sheridan Celia?
Yes.
Mrs. Sherman?
Yes.
Mrs. Caden?
Yes. Section 13, the Curriculum Committee. Mr. Chu will present.
The Curriculum Committee oversees and approves the district curriculum and assessment of programs, as well as field trips, home instruction, co-curricular programs, and the school calendar. For our agenda, today. 13.02, 13.03, and 13.04, we have field trips for elementary school, middle school, and high school up for approval. Agenda item 13.05 is home instruction out of district item for 2 students. 13.06 is a request to grant continuation through the end of the school year for a student that moved out of district post April. This is in alignment with our policy 5111. 13.07 is the 2024 project graduation run by the high school PTA. 13.08 is the 2024 Thomas Sharp School Summer Bridge Program, and that is, I think, linked to 13.09, which is the Thomas Sharp School Summer Multilingual Learners Program. And then 13.10 is the 2024 Summer Enrichment Program band camp. So that's, I guess, a summer marching band program for grades 7 through 12. So for today, I'm seeking approval of items 13.02 through 13.10.
Thank you. Motion to approve said items?
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
Questions or comments from board members? Roll call, please.
Mr. Chu?
Yes.
Mr. Craig?
Yes.
Mrs. Maya?
Yes.
Mrs. Mikulski?
Yes.
Mrs. Seltzer?
Yes.
Mrs. Sheridan Celia?
Yes.
Mrs. Sherman?
Yes.
Mrs. Caden?
Yes. Moving on to section 14, the Personnel Committee. Ms. Sheridan Celia will present.
The Personnel Committee reviews all recommendations for teaching and staff employment, considers co-curricular employment, and considers all professional development opportunities for staff members. Item 14.02 is the rescinding of a contract. Items 14.03 to 14.06 are resignations. Items 14.07 through 14.11 are various leaves of absence. 14.12 is the appointment of a speech-language specialist. At 14.3, it's the appointment of the new Director and Supervisor of Buildings and Grounds, John Longo. And congratulations to Mr. Longo, who is a Collingswood employee. 14.4 is the appointment of Al Hurd, who is a former Director of the Supervisor of Buildings and Grounds, to mentor Mr. Longo as he, brings himself up to the position, especially as we're entering into a very busy time of year with the Buildings and Grounds because we have graduation and all these other events. The appointment of a 10-month secretary is at item 14.15. 14.16 through 14.18 are the appointments of substitutes and replacement teachers. Item 14.19 is the appointment of PLC leaders. Item 14.12 is athletic event personnel appointment. 14.21, student teaching stipend. Item 14.22 is the appointment of a lacrosse and assistant lacrosse coach. Item 14.23, a listing of 5 new substitute custodians. Item 14.24 is a Sharp Summer Program staff appointments. 14.25, summer enrichment and band camp. Bless you. 14.26 is the appointment of a social work intern. 14.27, a student intern and practicum placements. Miss Earl, if she's still here, is going to be mentoring that person. 14.28, substitutes and tutors. 14.29, the recognition of retiring faculty and staff for the past year. And the 14.30 is the travel expense form approval, and this evening I am seeking approval of items 14.02 through 14.30.
Thank you, everyone. Motion to approve said items.
So moved.
And a second. Questions or comments from board members? Roll call, please.
Mr. Chu?
Yes.
Mr. Craig?
Yes.
Mrs. Maya?
Yes.
Mrs. Mikulski?
Yes.
Mrs. Seltzer?
Yes.
Mrs. Sheridan Celia?
Yes.
Mrs. Sherman?
Yes.
Mrs. Caden?
Yes. Moving on to section 15, the Culture, Climate, and Policy Committee. Ms. Seltzer will present.
The Culture, Climate, and Policy Committee reviews all updates and changes of district policies and regulations. There are some policies up for first reading tonight. Guidance counseling, bilingual education, code of ethics, safe routes to schools, sportsmanship, the student code of conduct, and equitable education opportunity. Okay, yeah, and there should also be where is it? Is Safe Routes to Schools the biking policy? Isn't that, yes, it is.
Yeah, it's
just now
5514.
okay, thank
Yeah,
you.
it's there.
So most of these are fairly boilerplate changes, but I did want to highlight 5514, which was, I think, originally called the Student Use of Vehicles Policy, which is why I got tripped up there. We did make a change to that policy, which is that starting in fall 2024, right, so that's important to note, not changing right away, but changing fall 24, students from 3rd grade on will be able to bike to school. And we are working on putting infrastructure into place for that to be a reality starting in the fall, and working with Safe Routes to Schools to do that. The second policy I wanted to highlight was 5600, which is the Student Code of Conduct, and I wanted to just make sure that I was distinguishing between the policy, which is what we're putting up for a first read tonight, and the regulation, which will come later. And the regulation is really what happens when the policy hits the ground. And for that, we will need the input of many more different stakeholders, and that will be in process for a rollout in fall 24. There are also some policies, 1503 up for a second reading, and 1504 are policies that are being abolished. So I'm asking for approval of items 15.02 to 15.05.
I think it's 15.04.
It is .04.
That was just a mistake in the agenda.
Yeah.
So motion to approve items 15.02 to 15.05. 04, I did it wrong again. Second, sorry.
Second.
Slate. Questions or comments from board members?
I do. I just want to ask a question about the regulation in terms of that code of conduct policy. Do we expect that to happen before it gets rolled out in September? Is that something that we're going to be reaching out over the summer to the administrators and all the stakeholders?
Yeah, my understanding is that is the plan and the goal, and we wouldn't want to roll out the student code of conduct without, I'm not sure we could without the new regulation.
I would hope not. Okay.
Any other questions or comments from board members? Roll call, please.
Mr. Chu?
Yes.
Mr. Craig?
Yes.
Mrs. Maya?
Yes.
Mrs. Mikulski?
Yes.
Mrs. Seltzer?
Yes.
Mrs. Sheridan Celia?
Yes.
Mrs. Sherman?
Yes.
Mrs. Gaten?
Yes. Before I move on to section 16, I was on a roll with the agenda. I just wanted to acknowledge Dr. McDowell had a childcare issue that he had to take care of, and he wanted to apologize for leaving early in the meeting, but didn't want to interrupt the personnel reading. Section 16, miscellaneous. 16.01 is the HIB report from the previous month. And that's all that's on the agenda, so we're looking to approve item 16.01. Motion to approve said item.
So moved.
And a second? Second. Questions or comments from board members?
Was that updated at all before tonight's meeting?
So this is from the previous month, and there actually was none.
Okay.
Any other questions or comments? Roll call, please.
Mr. Chu?
Yes.
Mr. Craig?
Yes.
Mrs. Maya?
Yes.
Mrs. Mikulski?
Yes.
Mrs. Seltzer?
Yes.
Mrs. Sheridan Celia?
Yes.
Mrs. Sherman?
Yes.
Mrs. Gaten?
Yes, and that leads us to section 17, which is our second opportunity for public comment. This section is for more general comments. I think most people were here, but just in case, the public is reminded that attempts to resolve all concerns and complaints should first go through appropriate staff members and administrators. And I just want to make it clear that this is a time where we are listening and taking notes, but we are not responding back and forth. So in fairness to all who wish to speak, there's a strict 3-minute time limit. Ms. Coleman will be timing per person, and please remember to state your name and address for the record.
Gretchen Kalecki, 920 Grant Avenue, Collingswood. This wasn't going to be a back and forth. I was told that. I legitimately had questions. I haven't seen anything before today about the salaries for Ms. Coleman or Dr. McDowell. So I wasn't online. I wasn't researching. I don't know of any leaked information. So these were my first time seeing this. It was a question that came up. I asked a question. I feel absolutely attacked by the board member stating that I am racist for asking a question. This is an open question forum right now. We are allowed to ask you as board members in a public position questions. If we are now going to be lambasted for asking questions, I don't know if that's creating an open, fostering relationship for our community. And really, my question was more about Ms. Coleman's salary than Dr. McDowell's. That being said, I have emailed with you, Mrs. Caden, and Dr. McDowell and Ms. Coleman about the lack of directory for staff on the web page. The last board meeting here, I was told that everyone would look into it and you had no idea that there wasn't one on the web page. I've asked repeatedly throughout many emails, as you said, to ask an email for questions to be answered. I've gotten no response for any such thing other than it's a phishing issue and we can't have that information out there. There's no phone number or address for any elementary school. There's no guidance link. I found the child study team link. I asked you for actual direct links, Ms. Coleman. You didn't give me any. What's going on? Why can't you put it out there? I want to thank staff in an email. I want to praise them. I want to ask questions for my 8th grader who has learning disabilities going forward, to get involved, to ask people who are involved in clubs, that kind of thing. Why can't we have that information even behind Genesis if we're worried about that? I want to know who's in charge of what club. I understand now that you've got an issue because you're going to be juggling staff, but it seems that for the past couple months that information hasn't been available either for current staff to be asked or praised. I want to know why it's not on the website. Why is there no phone number? Why is there no building administrators listed? Just even their names so we can figure out, we know the secret Collingswood first initial, last name, @calls, whatever, but if we don't know their first name, how can we contact them? If we don't know how to spell their last name, how do we contact them? And so the administrative assistants of those buildings are being pummeled to give out emails or phone numbers.
Thank you, Ms. Kalecki.
Wayne Rossi, 114 East Palmer Ave. I want to say I actually felt that Mr. Chu's comments were long overdue, and that I don't think that the specific question was intended as that, but that there has been that this has been something that's been a current that's been happening in board meetings since the board chose to hire a black superintendent, and I do think that it's a problem. I mainly came up to talk about that I'm just so terribly disappointed in the state and how it's really just given us the short end of the stick as far as budget. And I'm very hopeful that we can, with the referendum, that this will give us sort of the freedom, if we get it, to move some money around. And I think it's so important that we get this, because the honest truth is that the state has said it's basically not supporting our schools, and we need to do everything we can to support them. So I think that this is just such an important issue right now, because I just feel completely like we're being abandoned when every school has every school district I know has pressing needs, and to sit there and cut rather than giving aid when budgets are a crisis is insulting. So I sympathize with the earlier budget presentation, and I sympathize that some of the decisions will be very hard, but I hope that the referendum will at least let us choose to invest in our schools and our community. Thank you.
Leah Foreman, 501 South Vineyard Boulevard. Just do this. I want to thank Mr. Chu for saying what he said and calling that out. I felt similarly, and so thank you for acknowledging that. I hope that white people in this room can start to listen to the things that people said and reflect on them before coming back up to get upset about things. So that said, I also think that the referendum is an opportunity for us to invest in our schools, and I'm excited about that opportunity. I do think the state is hanging us out to dry, and I am excited to get back into that presentation and click on those links and do all the advocacy, because I think everyone who's working for the district deserves to be paid fairly, and no one's salary should be in question. And that goes from the administrative assistants to the top. You all deserve more money. And as tirelessly as I advocate for our black students, I will tirelessly advocate for the state to give us more money so you all can be paid a fair living wage. And that has nothing to do with the people sitting in those seats who are also tirelessly advocating for you all to get a fair living wage. And we shouldn't be fighting with each other about that. We should be looking up, not down. And I hope that people hear that and can see that. Thank you.
Alexandra Guido, 311 Lakeview Drive. I again would like to thank Mr. Chu for calling out something that any of us who have been following the board minutes, the board meetings, we've been here, we've watched it, have long seen people mistreating Dr. McDowell. And so I thank you very much for speaking up and putting that on the record. I also want to thank the board for their work of putting together the referendum that I hope our community will see the good in and show up behind. I see equity for our children. I see nothing but good for our teachers and having grade level partners, in having less work for our specialists who have to travel between schools, the ability to give more services to students who need them, the ability to share services. It's something that I wish for all of our children, I wish for our teachers, and I just thank you for putting that together, and I look forward to it passing.
Unrelated to that, Mary Ann Degenhart, 644 Stokes. I actually just want to echo what Gretchen talked about, because I had some frustration trying to reach teachers, and I sent an email to an administrator just because I happened to remember her name and how to spell it, to reach out to one of the high school teachers. So I do hope that's something that whoever it is, can straighten out.
Hi, Kara Boiler, 90th Summerfield Avenue. This isn't going to be as maybe thoughtful as some of the other people that came up tonight, but I just took on a role as the CHS PTA president, hopefully working with Mr. Newman to kind of continue the work that the board has started and the superintendent has started. And I also had, I wondered, as we're talking about things and as we're talking about the referendum and how we can immediately impact the Collingswood community, if there's a way that we can more largely think about the sending districts and how we can maybe start to include those students earlier in some of our activities that we have throughout the school system, if it's possible, because I feel like at least for Woodland and Oakland, it even comes in earlier than Woodland students. And so when they're coming at the age of 14 or 15 into the high school, that might be a very hard environment to adjust and adapt. And if we can reach those students sooner, I would love it. Time's up, but I'm done. That was it. So as we're talking about it, that was kind of a larger thought that I had. Thanks.
So moving on to section 18, motion to adjourn this evening. Is there a motion to adjourn this
So
evening?
moved.
Sorry, guys. Second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Thank you, everyone, for taking the time tonight.